Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a lovely sunny afternoon, so be cheerful. Again, good afternoon and welcome all to today's South and West Plan panels. My name is Councillor Eileen Taylor and I will be chairing today's meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed and the City Council YouTube channel so that the public can observe the meetings without needing to be present. South and West Plan panels deal with application from the south, northwest and west of the city. The aim of the panel is to hear all the relevant information from applicants, members of the public and council officers to help members of the panel make their decisions. Before we start off, could we go around and introduce ourselves? As I mentioned, I'm Councillor Eileen Taylor, and I will start from my left.
Nigel Wren, Planning Officer.
Ahmed Hunaidi, Highways Officer.
Darren Crawley, Lead for Sufficiency, Children and Family Service.
Councillor Sharon Burt, Middleton Park Ward.
Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Moortown and Meanwood Ward.
Councillor David Jenkins from Killingbeck and Seacroft Ward.
Councillor Paul Ray, Hunterland Riverside Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Gore Almus, Beeston Holbeck Ward, and I'll be substituting today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Toby Russell, Senior Technical Officer.
Good afternoon, Daniel Lummer, Senior Technical Officer.
Good afternoon, Councillor Trish Smith, Pudsey Ward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Colin Campbell.
Good afternoon, Councillor Dawn Collins, Horsforth Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barry Anderson, Adlin Wharfdale Ward.
Andy Booth, Clerk to the panel.
Nicky Dill, Legal Advisor to the panel today.
Good afternoon, Jonathan Carr, Head of Development Management.
God. Steve Butler, Group Manager of South and West and Lead Officer at South and West Plans Panel.
Thank you very much. And welcome Councillor Almas, who is subbing for Councillor Reagan. And also welcome to all those in the gallery today. Thank you for joining us. Can we now move on to the agenda? Andy, could you take us through, please?
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item number 1, with no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under agenda item number 2, there are no items requiring the exclusion of press and public. Under item number 3, there are no late items today. Under agenda item number 4, do any members have any interest to declare?
Yes, Chair. I've objected to item number 8 and will be removing myself from the panel at that point.
Okay, lovely. Councillor Anderson.
My wife, Councillor Caroline Anderson, is a governor at Brumholt Primary School, and I'm also obviously a ward member, but I do have an open mind on this particular application.
Thank you.
Right, moving on to agenda item number 5, apologies. We've got apologies from Councillor Reagan and Councillor Almas appearing as substitute today. And we've also got apologies from Councillor Finnegan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So could we move on to item 6, which is oh, I've missed that. I can't find it now. Sorry, item 6. No, it's the minutes.
Minutes, Chair.
I'm going too fast. So item 6, minutes of the last meeting. I've read the minutes. I'll take it. Have you all read the minutes? And could someone please move the minutes?
I'll propose, Chair.
Second. Thank you. Any matters arising? Should we, from the minutes, do we need to go page to page? Have you accepted that? So could someone please?
They've done it, Chair.
They've done it.
Councillor Ray and Councillor Collins. So.
That was matters arising.
Okay, if you want to.
Okay, thank you. You're not. That's why I was looking at you. At least we've got it right for you this time, yeah? So now we will move on to item 7, which is Brumholt Primary School. And Nigel is going to present this application with us. Over to you, Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a proposal to increase the size of Brumholt Primary School from a 1.5 form to a 2 form entry school. The proposal involves new extensions and new pedestrian access to the front of the school, an enlarged car park and perimeter fencing. In number terms, the proposal involves increasing the current school from its current school roll of 328 places to 420. So an increase of 92 school places. The application has generated a lot of local interest with representations for and against the scheme, but mainly against. These are listed in the report, but the main theme of the objections are on the grounds of highway concerns and congestion on the local highway network and lack of suitable off-site mitigation works. Other concerns have been raised in relation to the loss of an undesignated footpath which crosses the site. In terms of the comments in support of the application, the theme of these mainly covers safeguarding and the need to provide a secure and safe environment for the children. So in terms of the location of the site, the school mainly shares its common boundary with residential properties, with Brewery Rise to the north, Treadgold Crescent to the east, School Green to the southeast, and Parklands to the west. And there's also a footpath which runs between the western boundary and the Parklands residential area. To the south of the school lies playing fields, and beyond that, open land. The school currently operates on a split site with 2 buildings, the Key Stage 1 building, which is this building here, and the Key Stage 2 building just here. The buildings are divided by an undesignated footpath, which runs from Brearley Rise between the 2 buildings and basically connects to the car park in the health centre, with ultimately access onto Treadgold Crescent. In terms of land uses, you'll note from the report that the site partly lies within the green belt. The Key Stage 1 building is entirely within the green belt. So is the car park. The Key Stage 2 building is within the urban area. The lime-coloured notation relates to the protected plain pitches, and you will note from the report that Sport England are a statutory consultee in this regard, and their comments are covered in the report, together with all the greenbelt considerations, which are also documented. So the expansion itself is largely achieved by carrying out internal reconfiguration works to create the new classrooms. And the proposed building works only manifest themselves in a very limited way externally. In terms of the Key Stage 2 building, there's just one small infill area here where the current entrance is. In relation to the Key Stage 2 building, there is a proposal to extend the corner of this building to provide some office space. Similarly, an infill on the entrance area here with a small canopy. And then to the south, this is an extension to extend the current dining hall with a wraparound canopy. So all in all, the physical extensions are very small. To the west of the Key Stage 2 building, Key Stage 1 building, is a car park extension to create another 23 spaces, effectively doubling the size of the existing Brewery Rise car park. One of the other key changes is a proposed link between the Key Stage 2 and the Key Stage 1 building to provide better connectivity between the two. As I say, at the moment, they are separated by the undesignated path which runs between the two buildings. So the aim of that is to improve the connection between the two buildings and better cohesion. To the front of the building on the Key Stage 1, there is additional landscaping works, as well as an improved footpath link connecting the site to Brewery Rise. So a new entrance feature. In terms of the existing elevations, I'll start with the second one down, the northern elevation. This is the view from, as you would look from Brearley Rise towards the site. The architecture is very simple, mainly single story, brick built, flat roofed, with a raised element in the centre, which is the hallway, sorry, the hall. Seems to be right. Okay, so in terms of the proposed changes, they are very minimal. Again, on the northern elevation, this is the office which would be built on the corner of the existing arrangement. When you look at the eastern elevation, the only change there would be the raised section of the new hall. Similarly, on the western elevation, this is the side elevation of the proposed office with the canopy for the new reception. And then where the hall is being extended to the rear of the site, it's basically almost two-story with a wraparound canopy arrangement. And on the southern elevation, this picks up the extended hall, which is glazed at the upper level, and the bottom arrangement is also glazed, but with bifolding doors. That's to exploit the long distance views to the south and overlooking the playing fields and the open land beyond. And again, as I say, there is a canopy which wraps around the whole of that building. So in terms of the changes in the floor space, this is the Key Stage 1 building. This is the infill at the front of the existing building. And that element is just the new office space. Other than that, and the hall extension in this place just here to the south. Other than that, those are the only changes to the floor plan. And in relation to the Key Stage 2 building, again, very simple architecture, single and two-story additions. The only change here is in relation to this current recess, which is going to be infilled with a new doorway, very minor. And in relation to the actual floor plan, as I mentioned at the outset, the new floor space for the classrooms has been created by reconfiguring the existing uses. This is currently a library, I believe, and an IT suite. Those will become classrooms with a new learning resource centre in this area here, and that's the area that's just been infilled on that frontage. So again, very small and subtle changes. So in terms of the landscaping plan, I've mentioned the new path to connect the two buildings together. There will be some trees lost as a consequence of the development, and we noted that following the site visit this morning. The key one being T89, which is a sycamore tree at the entrance to the site. Due to level issues, I think that there are some engineering issues which would mean that the tree would have to be removed, although we will explore the potential of retaining that tree. Elsewhere, 2 other trees at the front of the site would be removed, and this group of trees here, which are white beams, 5 white beams, would also be removed. The 8 trees in total are a mixture of category B and category C trees, and whilst the loss is regrettable, unfortunately they need to be removed to facilitate the development. compensate for that, replacement tree planting will take place, which is more than policy compliant. Trees will be replanted in this area together with hedge planting to help screen the proposed car park extension in this area. And on the southern boundary, where there are gaps in the existing tree line, those will also be infilled with replacement trees and landscaping. One of the issues with the site is that it doesn't currently have a secure perimeter fence, and the site allows access by members of the public between the buildings and throughout the site, which poses a major security risk for the school. And to address this, a 2.4 metre fence is proposed around the perimeter with gated access of Brewery Rise and of Treguill Crescent. The majority of the fence line shares a common boundary with neighbouring properties, and therefore the visual intrusion is limited. The southern boundary is the most exposed, and therefore the fence line has been inset slightly, and you can see where the red line boundary is there, and that is the line of the fence along this southern section. And the reason why it has been inset is to use the existing landscaping as a screen, and to also ensure that the fencing works do not interfere with the root protection areas and the existing vegetation. So this shows the orange notation is the current path which runs between the two buildings from Brewery Rise, connecting ultimately onto Treguill Crescent. And in relation to this matter, and it's noted in the report that this footpath has not been previously registered with the council prior to this planning application being submitted. However, the submission of the application has triggered a claim from a member of the public, and the path has now been noted as a claimed right of way and is shown as a non-definitive footpath on the council's records. If the planning application is successful, it will be necessary to legally extinguish the claim right of way through section 257 of the Town and Country Planning Act. The consideration of this issue is a separate legal matter to the processing of this planning application. The granting of planning permission will not permit the applicant to divert or extinguish this claim right of way. Similarly, nor should the application to add the claim right of way to the definitive map serve to prevent the determination of the application of this planning application. So just in terms of some photographs of the site, this is a view from Brewery Rise facing south, the Key Stage 1 building in the background. The tree on the left is a sycamore tree that I mentioned, which is due to be removed as a consequence of this development. And as I mentioned at the outset, we will look to try and retain that, but it depends on the levels of the site and whether or not that can be achieved without undermining the stability of the tree, because it's necessary to create a step-free access into the new reception area. So clearly within the site, this is facing west. This is the stepped access currently along the path heading towards Brewery Rise. And just looking towards the east, facing the Key Stage 2 building. This is central within the path perspective there. And as you can see, currently the fencing on the right-hand side, as we look at it, is low and doesn't provide a sufficient barrier compliant with what is normally expected around schools, which would be a 2.4 metre DFE compliant fence. And again, an image just showing the steps at the facing west with the Key Stage 1 building in the background. This is the existing loop arrangement within the car park at off the Brewery Rise entrance. The central island will be retained, and obviously the trees as a consequence will also be retained. I think what I ought to say, and perhaps I was remiss in not mentioning this at the outset, is that this is currently open to members of the public as a pick up and drop off arrangement at the moment, and that will cease as part of these works. So the car park will become gated, and it will be only accessible by staff, and it will operate on a fob basis. So this is a view of the existing dining hall, which is to be extended, basically in line with this building here. And these are the trees, these are the white beams which will be removed to facilitate that development. This is a view of the Key Stage 1 building. This is the front entrance which will be infilled. This is where the new office space would go on the corner. This is a view facing east, which is part of a protected plain pitch. The land basically from this area here would be hard surface to create the extended car park. So a further 23 spaces will be added to the Brewery Rise car park in this area. This is a view of Tregold Crescent. This is a shared access into the site, which ultimately is the main access for the school at the moment. It's shared with the medical centre. There are existing parking conflicts in that area. We witnessed that this morning on the member site visit. And the parking which has been allocated to the school is basically to the front of this well mesh fencing, and there are 12 bays, and those are tandem spaces, so they don't work that efficiently. And on the Key Stage 2 building, this is the only area of change where this infill will take place. In terms of the highway mitigation works, the key change will be the introduction of a street order on Brewery Rise to prevent parents from dropping and picking children up at peak times. And that's a key change, because clearly at the moment, as I mentioned, they use this as a pick up and drop off. And to avoid this street becoming congested and various obviously conflicting traffic movements, the intention is to introduce that street order. I think that would be a major benefit and a positive to people who live on this particular street. It will certainly change that dynamic, but I also accept that the problem will not simply go away. It will be displaced into the wider area, but it will be diluted. And to support that, a number of other measures are proposed, which is protecting key junctions in this location here, 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 and further to the southeast, and on School Green just there, and in this location here. So key junctions have been safeguarded and protected. As I say, the street order will prevent access onto Brewery Rise. Initially, there was a proposal to introduce a zebra crossing approximately in this location here, but due to forward visibility displays and traffic coming down this hill, it was regarded and so it was discounted on highway safety grounds. So it was removed from the scheme on that basis. At these key junctions, crossings and tactile paving will also be introduced to encourage walking to and from school, and improvements to pedestrian safety. And on Leeds Road itself, the existing traffic islands are to be widened from 1 metre to 2 metres to accommodate any further increases in use, and to encourage the use of those, obviously at peak times. So that basically summarises the highway mitigation measures. I think what you will also note, and it's worth mentioning from the covering report, is that a proposed highway monitoring condition is also to be imposed, which will allow post-occupation monitoring to take place. So should there be any unforeseen circumstances which were not picked up at this initial stage when the site was surveyed and what our engineers have looked at and have recommended, then there is an opportunity to revisit that and carry out any further remedial measures at that particular time. So finally, in terms of the Greenbelt considerations, and as discussed in the report, the proposal would constitute inappropriate development in the Greenbelt insofar as it relates to the car park extension and perimeter fencing. As a consequence, it would cause harm to the openness of the Greenbelt, but this is considered to be limited and ameliorated to some degree with the additional landscaping and tree planting. And the report also identifies the very special circumstances the applicant has put forward. In this case, these are very substantial and relate to the school requiring a safe and secure environment for its pupils in order for the school to meet its duty of care in this regard. In addition to this, there is also growing demand for additional school places in the area, and there are no other alternative viable and deliverable options to meet this demand in the catchment area. Drawing these factors together, these considerations weigh heavily in favour of the development and outweigh the definitional harm and any other identified harm raised in this report. And it's therefore considered that very special circumstances exist which justify the development, and the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report and subject to the following additional conditions, which relate to waste collection and management, so a service management plan, for the gates to be set back from the public highway, and for a levels condition to also be introduced. And subject to those amendments, Chair, the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Nigel. We will now move on to speakers. We have got Councillor Flynn, Linda and Rob who will be speaking against the application. Councillor Flynn and Linda and Rob, could you please make your way to the table? I will do.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. You've got 2 minutes each, so in total, you've got 6 minutes. Thank you.
Sorry, good afternoon. I'm Rob Pearson. I am a resident of Brumholt. I have 30 years experience with child safeguarding in an area of Leeds that had 6-fold the area of the number of safeguarding cases. And I'm a granddad to 3 primary school children. Children are our future and they should be educated in safe, nurturing environments. The application in its current form is not proportional and is inherently unsafe. The applicants have completely failed to address the core assertion that the access path can be retained and the 2 sections of the school can still be enclosed to meet the needs of security. The closure of the access path is not about making convenience, it's a safety issue. The school's current low-level fencing is gated to allow supervised access from one side of the school to the other. Why does the application fail to consider minor adjustments to the line of a new high fence to allow an access corridor to remain? Already, at least one school in North Leeds is bisected by a fenced access path, so why can't this happen in this development? There is no footpath on the southwest side of Breary Lane, the green line shown on the map, and the closure of the access path will divert considerable foot traffic from safe to an unsafe route. Why have the real observations of dangerous driving on Breary Lane been so readily dismissed? Breary Lane has already been assessed as too hazardous for an assisting crossing. So why does the Transport Department assess the development as having no bearing on road safety risk? Increased foot traffic multiplies the risk. Why should children from the lower village walking to the village playground be forced to cross Breary Lane 4 times each return trip? Why have the applicants misappropriated the term safeguarding to push the application through planning backed by propaganda? Why has this been used to instill unfounded fear in parents, as evidenced by chatter on social media? Where does school perimeter management appear in their safeguarding procedures and policies? It doesn't, it's absent. The terms security and safeguarding are not synonymous. Security, no one would deny, but failure to properly understand safeguarding puts children at risk. If the applicants really have the safety of children at heart, then where on earth is the requested new fire plan? Thank you for your time.
My name's Linda. I live in Brumholt. Closure of the long-established path through BPS will deprive those of us with limited mobility, including me, of our human right to safe passage through the village that is our home. Many people use this path frequently. I use it at least 4 times each week, usually more. It's in a far better state of repair than many of the pavements in Leeds. The low-level wall by the lower steps and railing by top steps are an aid to climbing the steps. I'm not asking anyone, I'm telling you, it's a safer route than crossing Breary Lane. Breary Lane is 7 metres wide at the A660 junction and only slowly tapers. Anyone crossing Breary Lane slowly is and would be at grave risk from fast-flowing traffic, whether it's someone limping or a mother with children. No such risk is present on the path through BPS. If Breary Lane is not safe for an assisted crossing, then it's clearly a risk to pedestrians crossing it. Using a traffic survey conducted in lockdown is disingenuous at best. As an emanation of the state, the council has an enhanced duty to its residents. Failing to make reasonable adjustments, i.e. putting a high fence either side of the path through BPS, is, I contend, a breach of the Equalities Act. There is a precedent in another local school where the cycle and footpath through the school has high fencing along it. At what point and based on what criteria did the council resile from its legal duties to anyone aged over 12 in Brumholt? Parents entering the school grounds to pick up their children are in much closer proximity to other children than anyone walking along the path. Are all parents therefore to be DPS checked? If the school culture will be diminished by being in 2 buildings, what about the culture of the village if it is effectively cut in half? Ofsted recommended promoting greater culture of community cohesion with the village. Why is this being ignored? Why are you impugning the good character of approximately 3,000 residents, many of whom will be inconvenienced and in some cases put at risk if this path is closed 365 days a year? The schools only open approximately 200 days per year. Inculcating unfounded fear in parents is emotional abuse.
2 minutes, Chair.
Two minutes. We've got 6 minutes. So it's
Thank you. Members will be very familiar with parking problems around their ward, around schools in their wards. It's not an unusual problem. And there's a reasonable argument, I think, that if you buy a house near a school, then you should expect disruption once or twice a day. What's unusual in this particular case is that this particular school is increasing this role by 50%, from 280 to 420. And although Nigel mentioned this in passing, the published admissions number is 280, not 328. The expansion by definition will lead to more vehicles, more pollution, more danger to residents, many of whom are elderly and infirm, and some are marooned in their homes for an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon at present. So my objections are around safeguarding, highways and nuisance to residents. And in particular to a statement that Jonathan Pryor made at an executive board meeting when funding for this project was agreed. He gave a commitment that there would be a comprehensive traffic management and transport plan to address residents' concerns about traffic congestion, highways and road safety issues. He also said that if circumstances change and if evidence comes forward, we'll further adjust the plans. My contention is that neither a comprehensive or effective traffic plan has been put forward in this particular case. I've spoken regularly to representatives from Avis and Young, City Development, Planning and Highways, and while they've done their very best to alleviate the issues in the area, the geography of the area has, in my view, defeated them. The school traffic plan produced by the school itself, I'm afraid, offers nothing new at all. The traffic statement offers little by way of mitigation of highways issues and nuisance to neighbours in the immediate vicinity of the school, or to reduce the danger to children and residents. The only mitigations offered are double yellows at junctions where parents should not be parking anyway and making Breary Rise a school street. All this will do is push the vehicles elsewhere nearer the school, exacerbating the problem, not alleviating it. I've also been told that no parking on single yellow lines will not be enforced if
So 2
vehicles
minutes,
stay there
Chair.
for a short period.
Thank you. Is it total 6 minutes? Is it? Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Campbell?
I don't know which you want to answer this one. I think those of us who were on site this morning appreciate there are highways issues. As you say, I don't think there's a school in Leeds that doesn't have highways issues. You talked about a comprehensive traffic management plan. What do you think is missing from the proposals before us today that would make it into a comprehensive traffic management plan?
A very good question, Colin, and I'm afraid I don't know the answer. That's what we were expecting highways to actually produce to us. What's going to happen is that the vehicles that are currently causing a nuisance there are going to increase quite considerably. By my calculations and on the figures that highways have given us, the number of people who live outside of Brumholt itself will be about 90 out of the 420. That's based on the current figures that I've been given for the first 2 classes at school. That's 90 vehicles from outside of the Brumholt area that will have to be used to come in twice a day. Now, as I said before, all they've offered, and I understand the reasons why, are yellow lines, double yellow lines around junctions and the closure of Breary Rise. That is not comprehensive and it's not effective because it does nothing to address the danger and the highways issues that are currently affecting not just the tread goals, but also Breary Lane and also further down the road.
Sorry. Yes, I can reiterate those comments. I think we have to accept that there is a very, very strong case for this going ahead in terms of education being so important. But there will be consequences of it in terms of what you can just call Carmageddon will happen. And that I don't think any physical changes can change things. The whole year been spent looking at this, and the only change that will change things there is behavioural change in parents. A travel plan has been promoted, fortunately revised, and that needs to be advanced with tenacity. There needs to almost be a voluntary contract with parents and the school that they will actually not use cars to come to the school. I don't know how that can be achieved, but there needs to be some move in that direction to basically change behaviours at substantial scale and not the small increments that were suggested. Thank you.
I agree with what's been said entirely. I see no good reason why living near a school should mean you can't get out of your own driveway, which is very often the case morning and evening, in or out. The parents' parking is unbelievably poor, and they're rude and they're aggressive.
Thank you. Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question for the lady. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. You mentioned that you use the path that bisects the school quite regularly. I'm just curious, where are you going and where? So is it just a constitutional, or are you going somewhere specific?
I'm usually going somewhere specific, and given that I have a serious arthritic condition, I'm advised to keep active. And that doesn't include dancing across the road.
Right. And you don't currently like Breary Lane because it's just got pavement on one side. Is that what you said?
To do what I want to do and need to do, as in recommended by doctors, I would have to cross Breary Lane back and forth every trip I make.
Right.
The southwest side, which is the side I would come out on, has no pavement.
Okay.
It has a green verge that is muddy at an angle and very often has tire marks on it where one car had to avoid another.
So to stay on the footpath on Breary Lane, that's when you're having to cross the road regularly?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Just a couple of questions. One is, Billy, can you outline the discussions we've had about funding and where we've been looking for funding and all the different sources, and also the role of as far as the council are concerned, of the parish council in terms of this SIL that they've got, as to what they'd be willing to spend it on. And at a more general point about the footpath, what's your thought about any of the three of you on using the Parklands footpath as a way of getting up to the parade if money was found from the council to upgrade that footpath? What's your views on that?
So far as using SIL is concerned, I'm not quite sure where you're going with it, because what I'm objecting to is the highways traffic plan, basically, the lack of mitigation and so on and so forth, and the fact that 310 members of Brace, which are a local group organised, are still strongly opposed to this expansion, particularly as there's a greenfield site less than a couple hundred yards away that's been made available free of charge, but for £1 for the school that they've decided not to go ahead with. So far as the path is concerned, I mean, my view is that safeguarding will trump anything else, but whether or not there's an alternative to where the path is going now, I'm not sure, because my understanding from discussions with the various people I spoke to before is that there's no viable alternative to it.
You say this has been considered or looked at, or we've looked at it. The possible alternative route linking in through to the Parklands Moor Lane existing footpath. The only potential route would be from School Green or somewhere near there to go around the periphery of the school through the area that was referred to as being the maintenance border. That is low-lying land in a gully, in a ditch, basically. So I'm not too sure how that could support a footpath. If the live land was different, then that would be a viable alternative.
Provide me a decent footpath that's safe to use, I'll use it. It's as simple as that.
Okay, thank you. I take it most of your concern is mostly around highways and the footpath. And Councillor Campbell, I've raised the question is, most schools in Leeds have the issue around highways issue and transport. I'm going to take my ward, for instance. I've got around 4 or 5 primary schools, and seeing this site today is no different from my ward. But the question is, the school is not a new school going to be, it's an ex-school. So how many accidents happened there previously? If you're figuring, I know there'll be more children coming to the school, but at present, how many accidents happened? Why are you thinking that's the direction? Anyone?
I don't know how many accidents there have been. I'm sure highways will be able to point it out, but I do know that a policeman who tried to prevent a parent from driving into the car park had his foot run over by a parent who refused to stop. I don't know if that's of any use.
So there's no major accident on the main road leading to the schools? No. Yeah?
Whether there's been accidents with actual children injured or not, there have been near misses very recently, because it's all over social media if you care to consult it. There was a very close call. Let's not wait for an accident to happen.
Sorry, can I then get back to safeguarding? Principles of safeguarding, I've already argued that there's lack of proportionality here, and that's critical, one of the core principles. But if you're looking here at the argument that's been proposed by the traffic department, it's an insane argument, that there might have been a normal number of accidents or no significant accidents on Brewery Lane. A really important tenet in safeguarding is the main thing, prevention. It's better to take action before harm occurs. This is being used to look at safeguarding as a need for the perimeter fence. But if we just call that security and take it out of safeguarding, then there's no objection to security. But if you're usurping the term safeguarding, and in fact, if you want to use it as a model, if you're not taking the lessons from that and the principles from it, then it's running into the realms of disaster.
I totally agree with you. I believe in safeguarding for every young people and adult, but I also believe in young people having their education at the same time. And as I says, in my ward, I've got the same issue, but we all work around it. Thank you. Are there any more questions for the panel? Thank you very much. No. We've now got Maria and Rachel who will speak in favor of the application. Thank you. You have got 6 minutes in total to present here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So Brumholt Primary School is an outstanding school, and due to its success and increase in local population, the school is now oversubscribed, which is why it has been earmarked for expansion by Leeds City Council. The key driver behind the application proposals is the delivery of the improvements that will allow the school to accommodate expansion in admission numbers. The development team has worked closely with the school and officers and has sought to respond to comments from ward councillors and residents as far as possible. Notwithstanding the small scale of the proposals, the application includes a number of off-site highways improvements, including school street order, yellow lines, widening of the existing traffic islands, and adding formal crossing points that aim to mitigate against any potential impacts. The scheme will also increase parking numbers at the site, which will remove the pressure from neighbouring streets. This includes more accessible bays and brand new electric vehicle charging points at the site. A large proportion of the application site falls within a green belt, and therefore the majority of the proposed works are to take place within a green belt land. However, as confirmed by Nigel's assessment, any harm to the openness of the green belt resulting from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. The site currently lacks a consistent perimeter boundary, which allows members of the public easy access to the site, and as mentioned earlier, poses major security and safeguarding risks to the school. This is exacerbated by the undesignated path which dissects the site, which has been discussed earlier. The critical nature of these risks make addressing them an essential element of the proposed development. Whilst the proposals for the site have been carefully considered to avoid impacting on existing vegetation, the proposed development will result in the removal of 7 medium and low value trees. The initial planting scheme proposed 21 new trees, meaning that all trees removed to facilitate the proposed development were being replaced at 3:1 ratio in line with the council's policy. However, as a result of the public and ward member consultation, 14 further trees and additional scrub planting have been added, which is now above the policy requirements. Planning guidance urges councils to give great weight to need to alter schools, and therefore we politely request that panel recognise that all technical matters have been addressed to the satisfaction of local planning authority, and the application is positively determined without delay. Thank you for listening, and I will now pass it over to Rachel, head teacher at Brumholt Primary School, to tell you a bit more about the benefits the scheme will deliver for the school. Thanks.
Before you begin, could you please, I've got Rachel and Maria, could you please, who the other two, please? I've got on my paper to speakers, it's 2, but it's 4. Could you please just say who the other 2 persons are?
Sorry, yes, so to my right is Michael Norcliffe, who has prepared the transport statement for the application. So I thought it would be useful to have Mike here to answer any highways related questions. And at the end of the table, we've got Amy Smith, who is a project manager in site development team at Leeds City Council. And again, we've invited Amy here today just in case if you have any further questions. But the intention is for just Rachel and I to speak. Hope that makes sense.
Could you please add a minute onto Rachel because we have part.
Can we just ensure that the same proportion of time is stuck to, please? That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. From my perspective, there are three main benefits for the school. One, the opportunity to improve security on a site which poses obvious risks to pupil safety. Since my arrival at the school in 2016, both the LA Health and Safety team and the LA Safeguarding team have voiced concerns about our site. There are 3 bike locks on Key Stage 1 playground, but this is not an effective control measure for security, as highlighted in the recent local authority safeguarding audit. Members should be clear that although Brumholt may appear immune from high-level incidents, the path that runs through the middle of our school enables strangers to access our site every day. We cannot patrol use of mobile phones as we do in school, and there are instances of adults having physical contact with children at playtime. Thankfully, these incidents involve family members, a dad hugging his daughter as he walks past the playground, for example. However, children are accessible to the public. This includes estranged parents or those who wish to photograph or film children without their knowledge or permission. 2, the opportunity to address a 2-school legacy. As a newcomer at Brumholt, I was struck by the them and us feel across the 2 buildings. The bike locks make it awkward and time-consuming to move between Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. Our visitor reception is in Key Stage 2, a significant distance from our youngest and most vulnerable pupils. As a result, our admin staff regularly leave reception to escort or collect a child from Key Stage 1. In addition, visitors arriving on the Brewery Rise side of school struggle to locate the entrance. The opportunity to create a one school feel with one main hall, one library, one staff workroom, and one obvious entrance would help build a one school culture. The opportunity to move freely between buildings through our school garden would enable staff and pupils to work together as one school. Finally, the opportunity to improve the planning and delivery of our school curriculum. Mixed stage classes present challenges when planning a curriculum based on prior learning. Our classes currently rotate on a 2 or 4-year cycle, depending on the mix of ages. Members will be aware that there are huge differences in attainment and maturity between children, and this is exacerbated by mixed age classes. The national curriculum objectives lend themselves to single form entry, but at present, Key Stage 2 teachers must manage 2 sets of learning objectives every time they teach a lesson. They also must manage the social and emotional needs of a wide range of children. This is particularly challenging at a time when it is clear that COVID has had a significant impact on the attainment and well-being of pupils. The opportunity to improve the planning and delivery of our school curriculum, both academic and pastoral, would be of huge benefit to current pupils, as well as the many pupils who will be taught at Brumholt for years to come.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Anderson.
Just to start with, can you go over what the biodiversity gains are, and can you make clear what the tree provision is going to be? And then secondly, for Michael, the council recently at the executive board brought forward a policy on road safety by removing all injuries, etc. As a result of that policy now being implemented, is there any changes you think need to be made to the plan for this particular thing? And then to Rachel, can you outline the work that you've been doing to try and improve road safety? I refer to Project Happy of all the phrases, but so that to show what you have or haven't been doing in order to address the issues. Thank you.
I'll take a question about the biodiversity and landscaping. Thank you, Councillor. So just on trees, so we're currently, unfortunately, losing 7 trees, none of them being high value, but obviously we considered if there's anything we can do not to lose any. However, we will be providing 35 trees in total, so new species. And obviously we're going to go with heavy standard trees to make sure the replacements are adequate. We also provide an additional shrub planting. So in addition to 35 trees, we've got plenty of planting that's going to be around the school and around the boundaries as well to the south to fill the gaps. In terms of technical bits on the biodiversity, so obviously we are building on some of the play areas. So this is where the car park is going to go. So we're going to lose some of the grass, but the loss in biodiversity is not high because what type of species are there. So I know we are currently got net gain in relation to shrubs at the site. I'm be more than happy to provide. I can get the report on biodiversity if you're interested in further figures. We haven't actually received comments from nature team at this stage. However, this is not an issue. This will be considered at the conditions stage if application gets approved. But overall, I think we're hugely improving the landscaping around the site. So we've got a landscape architect who has designed everything together with the school to make sure that this is interesting, not only for biodiversity, but also visually and for the children to use in the future. I'm not sure if this is sufficient, Councillor Anderson.
Find out whether or not there was a biodiversity gain compliant with the council's policies, that the 10%, that was what I was just wanting you to confirm, that you are meeting the 10%.
Well, we will receive the formal response from nature team at the condition stage. But for example, in terms of policy on trees or anything like that, we are exceeding it. So that comment is still to cover at condition stage. Thank you.
Excuse me. Yeah, we did look at all potential options for improvements around the school and on the approach to the school, including crossings on Brewery Lane. It's not been possible to locate anything in a suitable area along Brewery Lane. In terms of that being not suitable for pedestrians to cross at all, I think there's a slight misunderstanding in terms of installing a formal crossing point will give priority to pedestrians, whereas if we stick with informal crossing points, then the onus is on the driver to observe pedestrians on that route. Other points we looked at were potential footway improvements on Brewery Lane on the south side. Don't believe that it's going to bring an adequate benefit considering the amount of use that it might get. And it looks as though it'd be a very expensive installation in terms of gradients and width. But in answer to your question, I don't believe there are any additional measures that we could introduce for the safety.
That this site is compliant and fully compliant with the proposals that have come out by the council in terms of road safety, and that there is no concerns whatsoever that if this plan is introduced in full by WICA and by the council, which is their intention, there will be no mitigation measures needed to be put in at this location. It will pass with flying colours.
I believe there's adequate mitigation been proposed. There is an additional condition that will pick up on any measures that we might have missed, so that it could be revisited as the school expands. It's just worth noting, I suppose, that there aren't any recorded injury accidents on Brewery Lane or around the tread goals in the last, I think it's 8 years. So I think it is compliant.
So in terms of measures we've taken to promote walking to school and so on, we do have a parent contract. Obviously that's voluntary. It's something we've put together. We've explored what parents will and won't do. We're trying to work with parents and change a culture. So that has good habits and talks about respectful driving. We promote no parking at all really, and offer sort of blue passes for people that need to park on site. So we say, come into the office and request a pass if you actually need to park there. We also taught about how we involve the children, because really that's the key to changing the culture. And we want children to be promoting that at home. So we worked with the local community and our PTA and the governors, and we launched an initiative called Project Happy, which was an all-encompassing thing. We looked at all the ways that we could promote healthy travel from a health perspective. So without telling people what to do, how could we want them to change? The biggest success for school has been introducing Travel Tracker. So you might know it's a scheme that's it's used in lots of schools across Leeds. Basically, the children come in, they self-register every day, right from reception. They tap how they travel to school. They collect points and they get stickers and so on. So they're incentivized to do that. That's whether they're traveling to or from school. We also do cycling proficiency, as was in year 6. So we offer a scheme for that, and we do scooter training in year 4. We work with our local police officer. So he was there yesterday. He comes half-termly to help us on site and be a positive presence around school. And we promote cycling, because cycling is the one alternative that our children feel they have other than walking. So we have two areas to ride your bike in school, and we have a sponsored bike ride coming up. So it's anything we can do to promote cycling among school.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. The first is, can you just clarify that once the fence has gone up in the mornings and the afternoons when the children are walking in and out of the school, will there be a gate on Brewery Rise for them to access? So you'll have 2 access points, will you, onto the school grounds? That was my first question. And the second was, please don't take this the wrong way, but it doesn't look a very pretty school. And I'm just wondering, you know, has somebody looked at the life expectancy of the school? You know, is this opportunity to buy this other site not something that you should really be grabbing so that you can get a more modern school? Or is the problem that the new site is too small and you would potentially have room for buildings, but not a playing field? What's the thinking behind sticking with this site? Thank you.
So in terms of gates and entrances, we have thought about that long and hard, because actually initially I was thinking about one entrance, bring it all over to one side. In actuality, that number of children, I think we need access from both sides. So the plan would be beginning and end of the school day, you could access the school from both sides. Obviously, once you're in, that's it. But we would still have entrances there. We wouldn't direct parents or children to one side or the other to try and allow greater flexibility. And we have a staggered start at the beginning of the day, which really, I should have mentioned, as another traffic measure. So 8:40 to 9 a.m, which means that there isn't the big rush at any one time. So we hope that flexible start and flexible entrances really cuts down the traffic use at the start of the day. In terms of prettiness, I agree. I suppose what the school offers is a great deal of internal space on a fabulous site. I mean, it's an amazing site. And I tell our children how lucky they are all the time, and not all schools are like that, with that beautiful playing fields. So a big part of my agenda was enjoying the outdoors, integrating the garden, getting a mile a day into the curriculum and so on. So when we first went through the exercise, from my perspective, the classroom sizes we have now is generous. I think it's bigger than we would get in a modern building. We have some really good facilities within. So, you know, an amazing hall. We have, as I said, a really fantastic school garden, which is a really big part of the local community as well, and something that we're working on to integrate more and more, so we'd lose that side of it. It felt like there was so much potential that if we could bring the right things together, it was all there. It was just split between 2 areas that didn't make it very accessible.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
I think it's fair to say that the issue of the path and the safeguarding is not a new one. So I suppose the question I ask is, why have you waited this long to effectively put a fence up and move the path? Because the path certainly has been an issue, it's been in existence for, well, I know for 30 years. So what suddenly triggered this? Because you could have put a fence up anytime in the last, well, I mean, you yourself said you came in 2016 and noticed it was an issue. You could have put one up then. So why now? And why is it suddenly so important?
It's not sudden. I have been talking about it since 2016. So one of the first things I did when I arrived at the local authority was commission a safeguarding audit, because I was concerned about what we were potentially exposing the children to. I live in Harrogate. This was a new area to me, new school. I was really surprised at how open it was. So I wanted to get on paper whether it was a considered risk outside of me saying that, which I think it was by the local authority. That was deemed definitely yes. At that time, we had no financial means of building a fence at all. We obviously have mitigating measures in the meantime, and those are still in place. Again, it felt like an opportunity that if we were looking at this as one school, this was the time to rectify a problem that felt historical, that should have actually been done several years ago. It made sense when the schools had two separate boundaries. I'm not sure how it happened, but at some point when these became one school, that path in effect was left in the middle of it. And practically from a day-to-day perspective, as well as the safeguarding side, I don't know why it hasn't been rectified, but I have been trying and minuting on my governors' meetings. Our governors are very aware. I've been talking about it an awful lot since I've come to the school. This is just an opportunity to address it.
So you actually had discussions with the governors about fencing, because if you park the path for a second, you could fence the site now, wouldn't you? And are you saying the governors were not prepared to fence prior to this?
They were certainly prepared to fence it. It's of huge cost to schools. And as you know, schools don't have surplus budgets. I should have said we did apply for SIF bid funding. So that possibility became available when we academised. And that's when you can apply to funding outside of your own school. I put together what I thought was a very robust case. We had people out to support that report, and we missed that by 1 point. So those are awards. Those are awarded every year for different situations. It wasn't our year, and we intended, and we spoke to the local authority about that and said we would reapply again the following year. So either way, we would take that route to erect the fencing. We can't do it financially by ourselves. So it would either be through funding that was given to us or through another opportunity like this. Part fencing it doesn't solve it, is the problem.
I just wanted to add to what Rachel said, that due to the size of the fencing, we need a planning permission to erect the fencing. So it made sense to put it all together with the application, because we can do that. Otherwise, there'll have to be a separate application for the fence and then separate application for other works. So it all came together when we knew.
It's okay, we understand about planning applications.
Thank you.
The bottom line is you could actually have done it before, but what you're really saying to us is it makes economic sense for you to do it at the moment, because there's a source of funding that the school doesn't have to effectively doesn't have to use its own resources to fund.
From my perspective, it would have felt remiss not to have raised this again as a safeguarding issue. So to have had the local authority out and said, yes, we totally agree that this is a safeguarding issue, but we're not in a position to fund you, which was the bottom line from their report. And for Leeds safeguarding team, we had an audit about a month ago. So on that risk assessment, I was asked again, what measures am I taking? This was the ultimate measure I could take, was to appeal again and say, could this be rectified at this point? It wasn't just financial.
Can I just say, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying to me. It's just that I think all of us, when we turned up on site today and met the dog walker coming through, we were all a little surprised that you hadn't got a fence already, quite frankly, because just about, well, in fact, all the primary schools in my ward have fences. And I just wondered what the rationale was for you not having one when everywhere else seems to have one.
It's okay. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to just ask the path. I think it is needed. I think you're disenfranchising a lot of residents from being able to use something. So I'd like to try and explore some way of diverting it, because as I say, in line with the climate emergency and getting people out of cars and walking and all the rest of it, it would be nice if they could access the health centre, for example. So it would be good to have that path in some form. I understand the need for it not to be through the middle of the school. The other thing is the current pick-up and drop-off arrangements that you have via Brewery Rise are obviously going to disappear. Brewery Rise is going to be a school street, I believe. So how do you see the traffic that solved almost, then turning into what solution have you got for that? Because there's no space that I can see anywhere for those cars to actually go. Another question I've got is, why do you need 23 spaces when you've only in the new car park section? Is it because you're taking the tandem spaces that you currently have from the Treadgold Crescent area? And if so, what are you going to do with that space? So I think that's everything. Thank you.
I think I'll be able to answer a question about diverting the footpath. So we have looked at obviously diverting it because we understand that it's convenience to a lot of residents and we know that it's been there for a long time. Unfortunately, we couldn't find anything that will be an actual diversion and as equally helpful as the path that is currently there. But I just wanted to point out something from accessibility point of view. The footpath that runs through the school is not accessible. It has 2 sets of steps. And we had comments from local residents who use it quite often that if they were using it with a pram or if there will be a wheelchair user, they are unable to access it. So, however, even if you live on the Brewery Rise, close to the school entrance, if you just use the existing footpaths and go through Brewery Lane, then to Treadgold Garth, and then from Treadgold Crescent to the medical centre, you are perfectly fine. And if this is all accessible because the pavements are flat. So I understand the convenience and I fully understand that residents would like to keep using it, but this isn't the only access to the medical centre as well. We have spoken to the medical centre and they are actually quite happy for the footpath to be closed because they're getting people accessing from all different ways. They're happy about the car parks being separate and they are fully aware of what we're doing. So, and like Nigel, as Nigel mentioned in his report, we have submitted an application, a separate application to extinguish this footpath, which is obviously separate to today. So I don't know if this is helpful, but unfortunately couldn't find a suitable diversion apart from the existing footpaths in the area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions to Councillor Jenkins?
Yeah, we still got.
Yeah, so the Brewery Rise question, the number of cars that are going to be displaced, they'd undertake a couple of traffic counts and observe 26 to 28 cars roughly over the course of an hour entering and leave. 11 to 13 cars typically parked on the street. We estimate possibly 15, 17 cars that would be displaced at each time for parking. Where they'd move to, there seems to be capacity just on Brewery Lane. I think it will spread a little bit into Parklands and onto Treadgold. That's the reason for the additional parking restrictions and mitigating that additional demand for car parking coming from that. Second question I think you asked was about the tandem parking arrangement off Treadgold Crescent. The idea was that might be freed up by reserving it as a short stay parking area. that might be used by parents attending the nursery. So the idea would be to try and make some really clear signage, some bold signage to provide a maximum stay of 20 minutes in each of those bays that are being removed. And that would be to replace the 12 bays that appear to be parked up all day, every day that the school's in operation at the moment. So hopefully you'd free up a bit of space in that car parking area, and that's what moves the staff car parking back over to Brewery Rise, where there shouldn't be then any kind of confusion about where staff and long stay parking and visitor parking associated with the school should be taking place.
Yeah, that's just a question on the school building. Given the fuel cost crisis, are there any energy efficiency measures being proposed?
Due to the modest size of the extension, we didn't have to produce a full report of sustainability because the extension is very, very small. It's altogether across both buildings only 215 square meters. But my understanding is from speaking to the contractor that they're using all the technologies that they can to make sure that building is sustainable, but I'm not aware of any additional sustainability measures being introduced, because obviously it all boils down to the fact that it's an existing school and the extension is very small. If we were doing a full refurbishment of the school and could render it and add panels, then obviously there will be more gain there. But unfortunately, at this stage, we can only rely on obviously modern construction to make sure that the new walls they create, they properly isolated. But unfortunately, I haven't got anything further than that.
Yeah, just a supplementary. So some schools have engaged in SALEX funding, but it looks as if your roofs are all flat, so you wouldn't get any solar heating probably, solar panels.
At this point, the solar panels are not part of this application. So I can't really say that this is something we are doing at this stage, but as far as I understand, the school can look into it in the future if there's anything it can do. Obviously, there is a cost associated, but yes, you are right, with the flat roof, they could utilize it, but we just haven't incorporated into the current proposals.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, could I now move on to any question to the officers from any members? No? Any comments to the officers? Yes, this question, which are you doing, Councillor Campbell? Question or comment? That's what I said, but no one didn't said anything, so I did move to comment.
Oh, have we? Oh, well,
So are you
I can do both if you like.
Well, no, do question
It's
first.
just usually the people who are sitting at the end of the table. Usually
Yeah,
say,
they can
"Thank you,
stay there because the
cheerio."
question might go, they might need to answer something else. So, question to the officer, Councillor Campbell.
What the hell? What the hell? Sorry, you've thrown me there. Well, the question I ask you is, notwithstanding what the consultants just said, which is almost the standard answer, isn't it, in relation to, I suppose, carbon neutrality, in that it's only a small extension, we won't have to do much. Will the works be carbon neutral? Oh, sorry.
The trigger for the development to address the policies, the climate change policies that you're referring to, would not apply in this instance because it wouldn't be classified as a major development. It's a minor development in planning terms. But the applicants will be providing electric vehicle charging points as part of this development. And the applicant has also made it clear that in terms of the actual the construction works, then it will be done in an efficient way to achieve the best solution that's possible with the materials available. What you've got to do is you've got to match it with the existing for it to look. So you know, there's no opportunity to, and the funding's not there anyway in the scheme to redevelop all the elevations and to introduce solar panels and so on and so forth. So within the funding stream that's available, it's very difficult, but I can't insist on it in planning terms because that policy would not apply in this instance, given the size of the proposal.
No,
Can I ask another question, please? In relation to the suggestion to make, was it Breary Rise, a school street? I think actually those of us who have school streets think they work, don't they? And they do. I'm not saying they don't. I suppose the question I ask, though, is who's picking up the cost of the conversion? So you've got your traffic regulation order. You've got the cost of permits for the people who live on the school street, which come in at about £10 a go. You've also got the cost of any permits the school might need. And then you've got the on cost, that's the one-off cost. And then you've got the on cost of the renewal of permits as and when necessary. Okay, who's picking up those costs?
The street order will be enforceable with signage, and in the report I've indicated that the school has been added to the priority list for enforcement. So a patrol officer will be policing that on a regular basis, and I suspect that would initially be the case. And then if there are infringements, then obviously tickets will be issued. And if people are complying and there's no reason for the enforcement officer to be there, then I would imagine that would tend to drop off. But in terms of funding, the residents, I'd have to kind of defer that to my highways colleague to see how that would work. But in practice, I think it would only be enforceable for half an hour before the start and half an hour after the close of the school day. It's not in perpetuity for the.
Can I help you out? Because you're answering a different question. You're answering the question about enforcement. Now, unless it's an issue, they're self-enforcing. That's not really a problem. The issue is that when you set up a school street, effectively you close the street for part of the day, beginning of the school day, end of the school day. All right. There's a traffic regulation order which allows you to do that. So there's a cost implication of the traffic regulation order. Right. Now, the people who live on the street, you cannot prevent them having access to effectively to have access their street for an hour and a half in the morning, an hour and a half in the afternoon. So actually you hand out residence permits, which allow them to effectively to use their street and access their property. They also, because the regulation order stops all traffic, you have to give permits to members of staff at the school who also wish to get in and out, which is quite reasonable. All right. Now, there is a cost implication to all that, because as I say, there's a traffic regulation order. There's the cost of administering the pass, and there's a cost to renewing the pass. Now, there's a one-off cost, which is your traffic regulation on the initial issue, which I'm assuming the school are picking up, but I don't. That's why I'm asking you the question. But the second element is who's picking up effectively the revenue costs in perpetuity for issuing permits to new people to all intents and purposes. And I also assume that there will be an agreement with the school about how they manage the street. So I don't know what it's like in other people's ward, but in ours, the school comes out and sticks a sign in the middle of the road and stations somebody there to say, you can't come down here, not for another hour. So that there's that, you know, how are they going to manage that?
Chair, sorry to interrupt, but just to be fair to Nigel, I think he did actually understand that question right from the outset, because he did say at the beginning that he was going to answer the question that related to the enforcement, then he would defer that to the highways officer. So I think he did actually understand the question. He just didn't get the opportunity to finish it. So if you can do that.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, Councillor Campbell. Perhaps the way that I started to answer the question. But in relation to the cost of the TRO, then that will be met by the applicant, as is always the case, But in terms of how the permit system operates, then I'd have to pass that on to my highways colleague, who's better placed to answer that question.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Nigel. Yeah, the permit. We might have to add an extra condition that staff won't be eligible for permits because staff will have their own parking. So the permits for on Brewery Rise is only for residents. I think we might need to discuss this. So because staff will have an access right through, but I don't believe that they'll need a permit. It's just for residents. The costs will be met by the applicant. In terms of revenue, from, I assume you mean from parking fines.
No, I'm sorry. There seems to be a fundamental problem about what school streets are like. Now, school streets, you effectively stop people using the street. Stop through traffic, I think is the best way to describe it. I know this is a one-way, effectively a dead end, but you stop traffic for 2 parts of the day, beginning of the school day, end of the school day, so it allows people to walk up and down with impunity. But you cannot close a street and prevent residents from accessing their property. So therefore, you have to have a system which allows that to happen. And the system on all the school streets I know, and I'm looking at you because you're nodding your head, because you must have some, involves them having a permit. And the permit allows them to access the property during the time when it's actually officially closed. Now there's a cost of those, which I'm sure the school will pick up, but the revenue cost, because those need renewing, who's picking that up? That's all I'm asking.
I think Councillor Ray wants to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the question is not the initial cost, it's who keeps paying for the permits in years and years to come. Who pays for the permit cost in perpetuity? Do the residents have to pick it up, or is the council picking it up in perpetuity? I think is the question.
I'll have to defer because, to be honest, I really don't know. Is the traffic regulation order that the applicant pays for in terms of ongoing costs? I'm looking at Nigel or yeah.
It seems like we're not in a position to actually answer that question, but I was just wondering if Mr. Norcliffe has had discussions about that in other circumstances and might be able to assist.
I don't believe that Leeds currently charges for resident permit parking permits. Sorry, yeah. I don't think that Leeds charges for resident permit parking. I'd have thought that the initial cost of issuing the permits.
I'm sorry, could you lean a bit nearer the microphone? Because I'm getting old and I'm getting a bit deaf, and I'm sorry, I can't hear
you. As far as I know, Leeds don't charge for permit parking. So the residents would be issued a permit when they request one, and staff at the school would also.
I wasn't expecting the school to charge. I'm just asking who's paying for it. So we cannot reasonably expect the residents to pay for a parking scheme which is nothing to do with them, not producing any. So therefore, somebody else must be paying, and it's either the school or the local authority. And if it's the local authority, I suppose the difficult question is how much is it going to cost us?
Sorry, Chair, we are just trying to check, but I think what the point that's being made here is that the initial cost is picked up by the school. And therefore, after that, there isn't actually a renewal cost that's charged to the residents. I think that's what we're trying to say, but we can check that.
Let's check it.
Yeah. So can we move on to further questions? Sorry, I'm just going to say, can we move on to further questions? We'll try and come back
We'll
to it
come
because
back
it's trying
to
to
to check it now to answer your question.
So Councillor Hamilton, do you have a question? Question was to the highways officer, or maybe Nigel, with regards to the street that's going to become the school street. When we go right down to the bottom, the main road, there is sort of a little hump there already. So we're coming out the school. On the left-hand side, standing on the left, couldn't there be another hump put in there? You know, I was asking if that could be looked at, you know, as part of, you know, slowing down traffic. And also, I did mention about, I wasn't happy about the tree being taken down. That, what tree was it? Is it not the sycamore? But I've thought about it, and to make it level for the through school, I've changed my mind about that, so I won't go on about that. And so just to I will say, with regards to the school trying to get parents and children to walk, ride and bus to school, the children are all willing and happy to walk, run, ride to school. But at the end of the day, it's down to the parents who, if they get a plate, etc., they're dragging them in the cars. So I do understand all the things that you've put in and try, because we try all the time. And just to say a little about, with regards to when it becomes a street school, and at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, the teachers go out and put cones, etc., and one person stand there. I think they had a list, they have a list at the beginning with regards all who live there with cars, and they were just ticking them off. And then as the teachers or the caretaker who do that every day, they get used to it. So I don't think, well, the street that I know, they just have a little square ticket in their car. So I don't know if they pay. Okay, right. So yeah, mine was just about to the highways officer or Nigel, if we could look at putting in an extra hump just to slow the traffic coming down, because they're coming up that way, and there's a ramp, a bump there already.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Can we put that slide back up? Is that possible to do that?
Yeah, I think it's number 26. Slide 26.
Can I?
No.
Shall I answer the question just in relation to the tree? Notwithstanding, oh, it's there, is it? Okay. Okay. So I think from the site visit this morning, Councillor Hamilton, these are the existing humps. And I think from what you described, you were discussing the possibility of a hump being introduced in this area.
Just to slow it down a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is something that highways officers can look into, but I do realise there's also some technical standards in relation to the proximity of humps in relation to each other. So there would be some technical standards that would need to be applied, and whether that can be satisfied or not in this instance, I don't know, but I'm happy to defer that to my highway engineer and ask for their advice on that matter. In relation to the tree, then yes, from what we discussed this morning on site, that there are some level issues in that area. If it's technically feasible to retain the tree, then we would look to do that. If not, I'm afraid it would have to be removed to facilitate the development.
Well, can I just say, Chair, that I hope they don't find any excuse not to put in a little extra hump, talking about distance, etc. Because some of the schools that we have to drive through, they seem very close to me. So I hope they don't find an excuse not to put one, because they're sort of coming round sort of a bend, aren't they? So I think once an extra hump is there would help. Sure, highways will look closely into that. Are you comment?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we can look into it, but we obviously we can't deviate from the current standards. There's a certain interval distances. The problem with having humps, especially in that location, there's a bend there. There's a gradient. We need to look. We need to be careful where that's placed, how wide it is. But as if the road is enforcing the intended speed limit, then the current humps do work. But there is technical standards, and all of this will still have to go a process. Take it to Highways Board, take it to approval from council ahead, and then we'll have to consult local ward members. So any of the detailed design stuff, we can definitely we'll be looking at it.
Just two things. This question to Ahmad. Can you just remind the panel what the current speed regulation is on that particular stretch of road? Well, I kind of know that, but I wanted to say it. I just wanted to make it clear that it is already a 20 limit.
20, yeah.
So when you talk about slowing it down a bit more, it might be at walking speed, but we could have a look at that. But then just going back, just going back to the other comment, Councillor Campbell's, Nikki's had the opportunity to have a look about the permit situation. There's the initial cost of the permit, but after that there is no so that's the tab effectively is picked up by the school. But after that there is no renewal cost. The only other additional cost that might be applied to residents at some point in the future is if they actually lose the permit.
Well, I'm sorry, Nikki, that's not what Gillian McLeod told me when we had the discussion about the one on Scarborough Road. So there's a base cost, yes, and then there's a cost element in relation to one if you lose your pass, one if you change your car, one if it's new people, etc., etc. There has to be a renewal cost. You know, every residence parking scheme we've got across the entirety of the city as a renewal cost because people keep doing it. You can't just simply, you know, how would people know? You know, if I turned up on Brewery Rise and said, "Oh yeah, I've just moved in down there."
Well, I've just been on the council's website, Councillor Campbell, and I've tried to apply for a school permit one, and it's zero cost. There is a cost apportioned to in relation to replacement, change of name, loss. So that I can only go on what our council website says, but in relation to what you've been told by senior officers, we can certainly follow that up. So we've got that information to hand, send that to you so that we're able to respond to that directly.
Yes, but the point is that you're not comparing like with like, because the school streets you're looking at were actually sponsored by the city council. All right. And the city council has agreed to pick up the on costs of, in effect, the permit issue. So when you say there's no cost, there is no cost to the occupant because initially, the city council picked up the entirety of the cost. We're not talking about that here. We're talking about, in effect, a scheme that's being introduced by a developer, which is different. Now, if we can put a condition on that says, effectively, on costs in relation to the parking permits will be borne, the cost of which will be borne by the developer and or their successor, then that's fine. That picks up the tab. It does not commit the council to expenditure, which I don't think we could do.
Is that what you're asking for, Councillor Campbell? I'm getting confused.
And that's what
Like that.
you just wanted to admit it.
Thank you, Chair. So my question really is to highways, I'm afraid, again. So we will effectively move to 420 places at this school. We're removing the current pick up and drop off facility in favour of a school street. and we've got 2 entrances. So given the geographical location of this school and the catchment area, we're going to have a lot of displaced traffic. Other than what the few bits you're going to do on Brewery Lane, what else are you going to do to provide something for the residents? Because it's not practical for many of those parents, I suggest, to walk to that school. I've got it up on Google Earth, and I've been trying to figure out ways of getting them there without using a car. And given the different geographical layout of it, it is going to be quite tricky for many parents. So I'd just like to see what plans you have for that, please.
Thanks, Councillor. The traffic plan, I think that Nigel presented, it shows what we're doing to mitigate that displacement of parking. At the minute, the significant impact is on Brewery Rise, and based on the existing behaviour and distribution of traffic, we're expecting this displacement to be on across 7 streets. So the impact will be less severe, and we're introducing the double yellow lines. We're introducing the waiting restrictions to mitigate that. Now, I appreciate that you're not supposed to be parking on junction Bellmouths, and it's illegal anyway, but people do. And the double yellow lines is to enforce that and remind them and show them that you're not supposed to park here. So whilst we're spreading we'll be spreading the impact, the double yellow lines will allow for more two-way movements, will allow for traffic to flow more easily. And that's the main point. And another thing I would add is the current situation on Brewery Rise is there's a highway safety concern at the minute, because people have to do multiple maneuvers while there's kids crossing behind them, because the road is very narrow. So you'll have to do multiple maneuvers. So having a street order will essentially eliminate that, and will make even Brewery Rise more free flowing. Thank you.
Councillor Collins.
Is it possible to say something about sorry, I don't know how to, is it possible to speak or not in terms of just adding to that in your question? I don't know what the protocol is. Sorry, I was just going to try and say something reassuring.
No, I'm sorry.
Sorry, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's following on from Councillor Campbell's, but hopefully I'll be more succinct. Officers mentioned that they would review the situation in a few years' time, and if more traffic works were required, then they would look again for another traffic regulation order. Is the school paying up front through Section 106 for that second traffic regulation order, or are you going to be challenging are you going to have to find a challenging way to actually fund it? How is that second traffic regulation order coming through? Because I agreed with my councillor colleague that speed cushions along there, you may need to put more in, or you might need to actually turn one into a platform rather than a cushion. So how's that second TRR going to be funded?
So the condition in your report refers to, let me just find it. It's condition 16, isn't it? Post-occupation highway monitoring. And whilst the wording of the condition itself wouldn't directly refer to a sum of money, because you can't ask for money, as you know, via a planning condition. At the outset, the applicant will put a sum of money aside to deal with any potential future remedial works which may be necessary. And that's a pretty standard thing that the council does when it deals with applications which it submits.
So the applicant will be paying for the second TRO and the works themselves, because that's quite a significant chunk of money then.
Yes, yes, that would be a standard requirement.
Number of points. If if this application was to be approved today, can we have a condition on about hours of work? Because if it goes ahead, because that's going to be a real problem if it was to go ahead. The next one. You did consider putting a crossing in on Breer Lane. So you had the money to be able to do that. Yet you now say you've not got money to do a whole lot of other things. What's happened to that money? Because, and also, why can we not introduce a school crossing patrol officer on Breer Lane, at least for a period of time to be agreed, 2, 3, 4 years, something like that? Because what I cannot understand about this whole process is that as ward members, we've been involved in this for ongoing months. It was during the pandemic when it first started. So it's none of this is new to either the consultants or to highways, not one thing. There is already a massive problem in the area. So it's not surprising to anybody. This is not suddenly something that's new that's suddenly just come along. So when the budget was set by Councillor Pryor at the time, what was included in terms of highway costs? Because I'm arguing that we should be paying for traffic measures on Breary Lane at least. We should be looking at trying to introduce a school crossing patrol officer at least. We should be doing something to ensure that we basically condition our own department, parking enforcement, that they will do something about this rather than just pay lip service that in terms of enforcement, because otherwise it just goes into disrepute. Even if you put yellow lines, and if nobody's getting any parking tickets, then parents will continue to do it and it will harass residents. And then on Cresskill Crescent, there are ongoing problems. Johnny Waters has been trying for years to come up with a solution to it. So this is not an unusual occurrence. There's all of the work he's done. We've not come up with a solution to it. We've worked with the school, we've worked with the police to try and get something done. Why is it that the council will not put their hands in their pocket and actually put some investment in to actually do something about it? I've been trying to source money from various Section 106 funding, getting absolutely nowhere because nobody wants to spend the money. Now, highways had the money to do the crossing. So that money was there. So now how about spending that on, okay, I've made some suggestions. Councillor Hamilton's made some suggestions. I don't mind whose you take. All I'm saying is the money, let's use that money to actually make some improvements and make this area safer, because it's not going to be safe. Because if you weren't on site this morning, but when we were on site, you could see the sort of snake nature of Breer Lane. You know, all it takes is a couple of pupils to suddenly see their friends on the other side of the road and they'll be off. They will be off. That's unfortunately the nature of young children. And so we've got to, we don't want to have to come back and say at some time in the future, oh, an accident occurred. Oh, we'll now need to do something about it. We need to stop the accidents happening now. Highways spend far too much time only putting money into accident areas instead of looking at putting money into areas before an accident occurs. Why should one of the children in my ward have to be killed or seriously injured before someone will take any serious action? And that goes throughout the city as well. I mean, I'm going on about my ward, but that goes to any other ward in the city. Why have we got to wait until someone is killed or seriously injured before highways will do something? This has been your opportunity to turn around at this point and say, this is the shopping list of things we highways want. And then let's, whoever it is that's funding it, come back and say, well, sorry, we don't think we should be funding that. We're not going to fund that. Because at the moment, I've been trying to get funding, failing miserably in trying various sources. I've tried education, I've tried highways,
Councillor
Section
Anderson,
106,
could you
and
let
SIL.
Highways
So
answer the question now.
where can we get the money?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I'll start with the easy one first. In terms of the hours of work condition, yes, one condition such as that can be added to any approval. In relation to enforcement matters, I mean, clearly, once the orders are ratified, it's up to the road users to comply with the law, and that would be the expectation. But as I've indicated in the report, Leeds City Council has a list of around 100 priority schools. And this scheme will now be added to that list following the representations that you and your ward colleagues have made. So it will be policed. And I think I said in the introduction that in terms of the level of policing, it's dependent on the number of infringements. And if a lots of tickets are being issued, then that policing will continue. If people are complying with the orders as they should, then that will be reduced. But the school will not be removed from that list. So it will continue, and initially it will be done perhaps even on a daily basis. But then it's a kind of a situation where you then have to monitor how it's actually working in practice. So that's the situation there. I think it would be unreasonable to insist on the school paying for a dedicated warden to continue to carry out. I'm not suggesting that, councillor.
So
it was
all I'm asking is for the money that the council are going to spend on the crossing.
Yeah.
Now be allocated to some measure, whether it be my suggestions or whether it be
Yeah,
councillor
yeah.
Hamilton's suggestions.
Yeah.
I'm not actually that bothered. It's
yeah.
to get some
Yeah.
investment in the area.
The applicant initially put these proposals forward in the draft scheme, which did include a zebra crossing on Braley Lane, as you've intimated. However, when our internal highways engineers looked at that, it was deemed to be unsafe and therefore was removed.
Money's still there.
Well, it's the applicant who was suggesting that. It's not. You know, as a planning authority, you know, we're just looking at the scheme on its merits as it's presented to us.
Council would pay for money. I think it was the council's money that they gave to enable it. Well, that's the impression I got from listening to Councillor Pryor at Execo, that this was council money that we are using, that we are to enable the development to take place.
Chair. Chair, there's been some very emotive language in here, hasn't there, about children being killed, etc., which concerns me a tiny little bit, because what's been brought forward is a series of measures which is actually proactive, not reactive. So the measures that have actually been articulated already in the plans that you've seen are proactive to cover what is perceived as potential issues. So that's in front of you. So it's not reactive, it's proactive, isn't it? Because it's been done at the same time that the potential increase in the children. And also we've talked about conditions about any future mitigation, if that is for whatever reason not seen to be adequate. So I think that point's actually been covered off, because Councillor Flynn, when he was actually speaking, was asked the question about what other measures did he want? And of course, it wasn't very clear. And what I'm now going to ask the panel is what additional, please, can I just finish? I'm just trying to be clear. I'm just trying to be clear here as to exactly what other measures beyond what's being put forward, particularly if the speed table is within the distances where we think it's not acceptable, what is actually required. I just want to be clear on that particular point, because ultimately the officers will have to discuss this further, but I'm not very clear. A proactive set of measures has been put forward by the applicant. Our highways officers have agreed that we think it's adequate for its purpose and fit for purpose. Well, all right, fit for purpose and therefore will work. But if it doesn't, there is a condition for additional mitigation work. So what more is required is the question.
Sorry?
Maybe we need to train as highways officers, then we could answer that question.
Chair, not to be too provocative here, obviously our highways officer has said that those measures are fit for the purpose. And, you know, Nikki and other legal officers have said that there has to be an element of trust and confidence in what the officers are saying. But even if that doesn't work, there is the condition about further mitigation measures. So I think that point's actually covered.
I was thinking the same. Who says, have you have anything to say? Just one thing, as I always want to come back, and maybe education want to say something. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, Councillor Anderson, the zebra crossing, the funding is we've got funding for this scheme in front of you. That's what the funding's here for. We can't keep adding to it because we're mitigating. It's a proportion of the development. We're mitigate the NPPF is to mitigate the development's impact to acceptable degree, and this is what we have here. Where as a highways officer, we've assessed this independently to the applicant. So we there are a number of officers who looked at it. The other point about school patrol officers, I think Nigel covered that. That we'll have our own parking services that they'll add this to the list, and then they'll enforce it. There is the stuff about sustainability. So the school will have additional cycle parking and scooter places and 3 EV charge points, and then 3 extra to be provided in the future. So this is policy compliant with the sustainability and accessibility standards and the street design guides and policy N8. And this is why highways is find the scheme acceptable.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to add that where the team's efficiency and participation team, where the proposal to create additional places in Brumholt came from and went through the public consultation, I know comments have been made or questions have been asked around the land that was set aside within the housing development at Brewery Lane, and just really I just want to clarify why we decided to not pursue that. So that was an option when we were looking at school places going back a couple of years. However, the land that was set aside was for a 2 form of entry primary school, so that would have created an extra 60 places in the area. At the time, Brumholt's published admission number was 40, so there would have been 100 places if we'd have pursued that route with a free school. Looking at the demographic data that we get from the NHS, Brumholt gets around 31 births every year. What tends to happen with the cohorts, by the time they go into reception classes, either families have moved into the area, but the cohort has grown to around 40, sometimes 42, 43. So that's fairly consistent, and the school tends to fill on that. School's a popular school. Our calculations for the housing development, the planning permission was 330 houses. So we work on a formula of 25 primary age children per 100 family dwellings. So based on that calculation, I think it's around 83 children we'd expected to be yielded from that development, which averages around 12 children per year. So adding that extra 12 children onto what we were seeing demographically within from the NHS data, our estimates were that 60 places in the area would be sufficient for children of Brumholt. So our decision then was, well, we've got a primary school there already. Can that school expand to 60, taking it up an extra 20 places per year? Adding in an extra new school would over provide, would impact on one or both the schools financially, or either that or both schools would become popular, and what it would do is it would bring in children from outside the area. There'd be lots of traffic into the area because we know that Brumholt itself as an academy is popular. So either the new school, free school, would be impacted and would not be sustainable, or there would be lots of traffic into the area from people that are not living in Brumholt from further afield that potentially are trying to get into schools as part of a view to getting into secondary provision. So that was the decision that we made, that we obviously went out to public consultation on, and obviously that's what's been put forward, what was passed by executive board in terms of the authority to spend to expand Brumholt.
Thank you. Steve, did you want to come in? Councillor Hamilton, did you?
Are there any further questions to Darren first? Because I just wanted to clarify a couple of things.
Saying to the officer, thank him, because I was saying, we're looking at it, wouldn't it be better to knock them down and just rebuild? But I've heard what you said about free school and expanding it and people coming from outside the area, so I'll go with it.
The two things I just wanted to clarify was that obviously you've got to consider the application that's in front of you. So demolishing the school and starting again is not what we're considering. I just thought, I know you know that, but I just, yeah. But the two things I just wanted to clarify was that actually the extensions and alterations of the school, which is the hall, the headmaster's office and the entrances, don't affect actually the teaching accommodation. So if you were to take away the extensions that are in front of you, the additional intake for which we've had this long debate about the highways issue could actually be done without the external alterations that have been proposed, because it's all internal within the fabric of the existing building. So I just wanted to make that point clear. The second one is something I think got lost in the mix earlier on, which related to the footpath. And I just think members need to be clear of this before we get anywhere actually making a decision on this application, that actually this application doesn't grant permission for the closure of that footpath. That's done under a separate legislation. Ultimately, it would facilitate it if it was granted, because of course it would be fenced. But I just think members need to be absolutely clear of that, because we spent a lot of time talking about the closure of footpath. And I think it's something that was lost to the speakers that were speaking against it. I don't think they fully understood that. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we will now move on to comments. Are there any comments? Councillor.
I heard the oh no from over there, so I want to back about 20 minutes.
Yeah, oh no from here. Thank you, Chair. My comment is, well, it should really have been a question, but you didn't come back to me, so so it's kind of for highways and it's almost a comment question. So, but no, I'll tell lights for Nigel. Sorry, you made a comment that enforcement would be issuing any penalty notices as required for poor parking, etc. And that the more need there was for penalty notices, that would be how much more presence they would offer. But we all know, because we've all got schools in our wards, that isn't the case. So if we don't have enforcement officers there to issue penalty notices, then we won't get enforcement officers back to issue the penalty notices. So I was just a little bit confused what you meant by that, because I think we do need the enforcement officers, and we do need them around all of our schools, to be fair. But we need to buy in from the schools to, as you say, educate the parents. So it's a journey for everybody.
Yeah. Just to clarify, I mean, clearly the problems that have been discussed today are common with every school across the city, across the country. And you know, obviously I'm sympathetic to that. But at the same time, we have got to deal with proposals to expand schools, and there will be consequences. But in terms of the management, clearly officers, enforcement officers can't be at every school at every single peak time. So it is spread across the city. And I did say that it's been added to the list of priority schools, and it will be policed as actively as it needs to be. And where fines, where fines are issued on a frequent basis, then it's almost self-perpetuating because officers come out more often then to issue more tickets because of their ongoing infringements. But if they're not issuing tickets because people are complying with the orders and obeying the law, then there's no need for them to be as active in that area. That's what I was trying to say. And yeah.
I come back on my comment now. Sorry. So based on all of that, and to try and mitigate all of that, would it not have made more sense to have had the pedestrian entrance down by Tregold or Treadgold Crescent, and then leave the current pick up and drop off down Brearley as it was? So they could come down, they could drop off and come back out, and then you wouldn't have a lot of the other problems that you've got. I appreciate that the residents on that street that wouldn't be a school street now may be an issue, but would that not have made more sense in the longer term?
Well, I don't know if highway colleagues want to comment on that. This obviously is the proposal which is before us for consideration today. Yeah.
Comment. Comment, Councillor Campbell.
I think, Chair, I suppose it's one of these ones that we're always stuck with, isn't it? Which is, if you were building a school now, you wouldn't put it there. But we're stuck with what we've got. And I don't think any of us have raised any issues about the school expanding, because we know the school needs to expand because there are more houses in Brumholt and the demand's there. So that those two are given, I think, in our opinion. I think our concern relates to, if we expand the school, the impact of that expansion on the neighbourhood. And we have to ask ourselves the question, and I suppose from my point of view, it really is the traffic issue that's the major one. Where am I confident that what's proposed will mitigate against the issues that will inevitably arise? Yeah. Now, I accept what highways officers have said to us. They're employed to give us the best advice that they think is available. We're supposed to look at that advice, look at what we saw on the ground this morning, and say to ourselves, do we think that's adequate? And I have to say, in the case of Brewery Lane, I don't think it is. And I think Sharon's come up with a suggestion. Barry's got a suggestion. I think there are more works that could take place on Brewery Lane to make it a less attractive spot to stop and drop the kids off. The school street, I'm a great believer in school streets. I think they're a great idea, but we have to be careful as a planning authority that we are not committing the council to funding something down the line. So that needs to be clarified as to who's picking up the tab in the long term for the school street. I understand what you're saying about the works are not big enough for us to ask for some carbon mitigation, but quite frankly, the way things are with global warming and 2030, we can't afford not to say all the works you do should be carbon neutral. And I think it should be beholden on developers, never mind just us, to come along and say we are carbon neutral because we are interested in protecting the environment for the future of our children. I think I know it's always the same with consultants, isn't they? Every time they want to chop down a tree, they always tell us the trees are low value.
Yeah.
It's almost a given, actually. The trees themselves are not low value because they do a fantastic job at sucking carbon out. And if you look at those trees, there are 5, 6 mature trees on that site, which are sucking a considerable amount of carbon out of there. Notwithstanding the fact they're going to plant 14 heavy standards, those 14 heavy standards will not suck as much carbon out of the atmosphere as one of those trees. Now, I appreciate that some of at least 3 of the white beams were planted in the wrong place. With hindsight, you could say that. But I think much more could be done and should be done bearing in mind that this, we're trying to get developments carbon neutral. So I think more could be done to suck carbon out of the atmosphere. The path, as you say, is a completely different issue. It's different legislation. And as I said on site, actually, even if they didn't get the path sorted out, 90% of what they want to do, they could do on site. So at the moment, I'm in a bit of a difficult position because I don't think the traffic works are adequate. I think the rest of it can be overcome with a bit of work.
Ray.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's been clarified actually already by our education colleagues that actually the school could expand without a planning permission because of the internal layout. So actually, we're not actually having a school expansion because of the planning application. They can do it anyway, making alterations to the building. That would have an impact on the highways mitigation measures, because actually they could do it now already and not have to put in any highways mitigation measures because they could do it anyway. The path issue is completely separate, as we've been advised repeatedly. I do agree with Councillor Collins that maybe we should be looking at slightly more heavy mature trees rather than only 14 of them. And I think that's a conversation that should be considered. But on the basis of this, none of us would accept in any of our wards a school having such a permeable barrier where you could not guarantee the safeguarding of children. All the other issues raised by people today are actually not overly that material. The school can expand already with no highways mitigation. They can do that building work. The path can go, if it's agreed, that it can go via our public right of way team. So we're here to discuss effectively the extension to the building, which doesn't actually affect the capacity and whether or not they should have a fence around to protect the kids. And I think that's what we're here to make a decision on today. And I think on that basis, I'll be supporting the recommendation.
Yes. Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. A very good explanation from Children's Services, by the way, as to why we should be expanding this school and not putting in a new school. I fully understand that now. Thank you for that. I think our priority has got to be to allow this school to expand. Children in that area do need good education. This is a school that's proved it provides good education. I think it's also essential that we allow them to put the fence up. I do not like the idea at all that that fence is missing. And can support the head teacher that it should have been something that was done quite a long time ago. I haven't heard any justification as to why that footpath between the two buildings should really be maintained. One objector seemed to be saying it wasn't fair on the children. Another one seemed to be saying it's not fair on me. So the children are obviously still going to be able to walk to school and use that gate. And I would have thought that the lady who has been advised to exercise could actually try and find another route to exercise. So I appreciate it's not in our gift to actually close that footpath, but I don't think giving the school the opportunity to put the fence up is in conflict with that at all. Highways, it's always a big question. Highways got a horrible job because they've got all of the original current roads to try and deal with and improve on. And when they try and make things wider or straighter, then there's always somebody who's going to object to that as well. But I would plead with them to make sure that that pot of money is properly put aside for any future TRO and future works, and that in a couple of years' times that it's not down to the local councillors to try and justify why those additional works don't go in. Thank you, Chair.
You, Councillor Collins, you have already aligned yours to officers. That's what I was going to say to highway officers. I won't repeat myself. Councillor Anderson, did you want to say something?
Yeah, the school needs to be expanded. We need to safeguard the pupils. But I'm sorry, highways, you've done absolutely nothing to help mitigate the problems that exist in the area, and won't get any better as a result of this. Irrespective of the expansion, there are serious problems. It's not as if it's new to highways. You know, we're right to expand the school. We're right to put the fence up to safeguarding, but the community is being let down by highways not taking this issue seriously enough and coming up with possible alternatives. You've just accepted, oh, it's difficult to do. Well, yes, it might be difficult to do, but it's not impossible. It is not impossible to improve the situation on Crescald Lane, the surrounding streets, on Breary Lane, because people will disappear up all the houses off of it. People will park over people's entrances. There will be frustrations. There will be people rising temperature. The same as outside every other school, probably in this city as well. Exactly the same thing happens. We are being let down. The residents are being let down by highways here. You've had plenty of opportunity to come forward today and say, you know, well, we've reflected back, we've heard what's been said from the people to begin with, and members here today. We're now going to go and look at this, we're going to look at that. Now, it might be that you after you've done your professional analysis, that they're not possible, but you've not even said you're going to look at them. You've just dismissed them as saying, well, fine, we've looked at it, we know best. And so I'll reluctantly have to support it, because I do want the school to be expanded, because the school itself wants to improve its offer, and this is the only way we can get it done for them. But we are being let down, and the school are going to have to put up with a lot of flack over highways issues that are not their responsibility for sorting out. And it is unfair that the head teacher has got to take the flack for things that she cannot do anything about. She's trying her hardest to do things. I'm sorry, but it just, we've been let down. We're going to end up with the right answer.
Councillor Anderson, I'm sure Highway did the best they can on this project. They went out and they do the best they can. They think of the young people, and they also think of the road users as well. There's other people use the roads as well as young people. So I don't know if Highways, I know it's a comment, but I don't know if you just want to prove yourself that, because I feel that Highways, I'll answer the question to his best of his ability. So there's no more comment at this moment, and I will just ask the lead officer to Steve.
Just before we go forward to see whether anybody's prepared to support the motion that's in front of you, which is to approve the application, just to make it absolutely clear to members, and I hope I captured everything, but there was an additional condition about the mitigation post-occupation, if necessary, in terms of the highway works. Sorry, right. Service management, gates to be set back from the access, levels, construction hours. And then one other issue which we will try to take forward, but I think it's somewhat dependent upon the levels and the construction of the new path off Breary Rise, is the impact upon that tree. Now, I know members don't like to hear this, but I've got a feeling that Darren might be able to answer this question for me. But really, there is a pressure in terms of a decision today, so that these works can be carried out for September. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah. So what's in front of you? What's in front of you is obviously the substantive motion, which is to approve, subject to these conditions. Thank you, Chair.
So, and Steve Roundup, could I now ask for a proposer and a second?
I propose, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. And so on this note, we will now go to the votes. All those in favor? I'm in favor.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's unanimous after all that.
Against? Abstention? Okay, thank you.
So again, just for clarity, subject to those additional conditions, because I missed that word out and the further consideration of that tree, the motion has been carried unanimously. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, we are going to have a comfort break. Could you, we'll have 10 minutes comfort break. So it's now, we'll be back at 4. Okay, welcome back. We will now move on to item 8, Victoria Riverside. Now can I call on David? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think that it's fair to say this application is a bit more straightforward, hopefully, certainly from a highways perspective. So there's two applications before you today. One's for the planning application and one's for the associated listed building. It relates to Hunslet Mills that members had a look at this morning. And it's essentially the proposed change of what was originally intended to be a retail space into 5 flats. So I'll just take you through the presentation. So that's the site identified there, and the units themselves are on the corner really of Atkinson Street and Goodman Street. Oh, sorry. So it's essentially this area here, and members will recall from the site visit, there's already a car park laid out to the front. And just it's part of a wider redevelopment of the sort of listed mill complex that you can see in front of you there. So the red brick one is obviously one of the historic buildings that's being converted to flats. And the new building, Block B, which is the subject site, and you can just see in the distance, that's a brand new block, and you can just make out the retail space provided on the ground floor. And there's just an image. So you can see there's the car park already laid out to the front, and the white panels are hiding essentially existing openings that were proposed as part of the retail unit, but they would need to be reconfigured to provide access to the flats. And there would essentially be 4 entrances to the flats provided along that elevation, and would include, you can just pick out that there's actually a raised finished floor level due to the area being in a flood risk. So there is still an access ramp proposed. There was an access ramp proposed as part of the shop unit, but it would just be reconfigured. So that's not been built as yet, but you can see the space is clearly there. And the flats above, I think most of them are already occupied. And in terms of works elsewhere on the site, there's another substantial mills building behind this unit that's currently being converted still. And this is just to show, we didn't see this elevation on the site visit, but this is just down the side of Goodman Street. So again, just some existing openings that just need to be slightly reconfigured for the flat access. So that's where one of the flats would be accessed. The other 4 would be from the front. So this is the existing layout as approved. So we're just talking about this space here. It's about 320 square meters. So you can pick out, there's the access ramp that's not gone in yet. This is where the car park is. So it's essentially just changing the use of that space. And this is the proposed layout. So 5 flats. There's 4 1-bedroomed and 1 2-bedroomed. They do comply with the council's minimum space standards. The access officers content with the proposals because 4 out of the 5 would be accessible. And you'll pick up from the report, there were originally 7 flats proposed, but they've been negotiated down in order to provide an appropriate living environment. So these are the proposed elevations. So it's just this one on the bottom. So you can just see how that area gets reconfigured with the 4 doors. And this is the side. So this is the only access that wouldn't be level. So just some steps up there. And the reason there isn't a ramp there is because there's not enough space available to put a ramp in and still stay clear of the public highway. And this really just picks out the parking areas. So although it's laid out as a car park already, it would need to be marked out again because the 5 flats would each have a parking space, but because they'd also have electric vehicle charging points, they're slightly wider bays. So both the electric vehicle charging points need to go in and the bays slightly adjusted. You can just pick out there's some additional landscaping to go in. Currently it's all hard surfaced. So the substantive concern that's been raised by pretty much everyone in the representations, including by Councillor Ray, and there are speakers on the proposal, relate to the loss of essentially a retail facility on the basis that well, loss of the ability to provide one, shall we say, and in particular the concern being that there's really not much provision in the area. So what I have done is just set out the application site in context and shown where the nearest units are, essentially. So you can pick out there that there's the Spa and the Londis. They're both facilities associated with petrol filling station. They're both 24 hours. But then you've got the Tesco at the Leeds dock, which is a Tesco Express of a reasonable size. Then you've got more traditional provision in the form of the big Morrisons that's part of the Hunslet town centre. And there's also a Lidl there, and just identified Costco. I know it's not necessarily something that everybody would go to, and I think you do need to be a member, but it's obviously not far away and a big outfit in terms of the offer. Just to help probably in terms of the objectors to point out the reference that's made in the report about the adjacent development, the Miller Homes one. That's this site here, the Miller Homes one, often called Yarn Street. And you can see from the report there was, again, sort of some commercial units proposed as part of that permission originally. They were actually over here, and they were allowed to be converted into flats in 2013. And that's really just to highlight the kind of offer that there is. So I think essentially the Londis is probably the smallest, the Spa's a bit bigger. Those two particular units are pretty much the same distance away from the application site. It's less than a 10-minute walk, but you can just pick out the Tesco Express and the big Morrisons. So that's really just to give members an idea of what the actual provision is. You can see from the report that both applications are recommended for approval. I completely understand the concerns that have been raised regarding the loss of the or the intention not to provide the retail facility, shall I say, as opposed to a direct loss. I think fundamentally, and it's set out in the report, the issue we have at hand that it's an allocated housing site. So the provision of some more flats on the site is obviously in accordance with that allocation. Although there is a site-specific policy that does say alternative uses are appropriate, the context within which that flexibility is given isn't because it's a mixed-use site allocation, because it's not, it's just a housing allocation. The reason that flexibility is given is purely on the basis that they're listed buildings, they're going to be very big and expensive to convert. And the idea behind that flexibility is to open up more options and bring the site forward for redevelopment. So essentially, it's to help secure the long-term future of the listed buildings. as members will have seen on site, that's already been achieved or is actively being achieved in terms of the flat conversions currently taking place. So there's no policy requirement to essentially retain that retail use. So that's the proposal in front of members. You can see from the listed building application that essentially the alterations proposed are so minor that they don't really have any adverse impact on the setting. So both applications are before members recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. We did have 2 speakers against. We only have 1, Steve. We also have Councillor Ray, who's in favor, he will be supporting it, but I don't think Councillor Ray will be speaking. Yeah. Mm. Sorry?
She said he's supporting him.
Okay, Stephen, you've got 4 minutes to present your application.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm a resident of H2010. I've got a young family there. We were sold by Miller Homes, the shopping facilities there, and that got taken away from us. And then JM Construction also promised that as well, and that got taken away from us. And it's really important for me, for my family, to kind of have that as an outlet, for my kids to be able to walk to the shops, you know, because otherwise we're just stuck on like an island, masses of roads around it, and the shops there on the plan they're too far away from my children. It's like across big roads and stuff like that, so that you're taking away that sense of community as well from a shop. There was a cafe on the site, and that's now been replaced. It's gone up, so you can't there's no sort of sense of being able to walk across the estate or anywhere to meet anybody. It's kind of that element is gone. There's no, when lockdown happened, when I was in working from home, I could walk across the estate to the cafe and chat to people, make friendships, a sense of community got built, find out who's got kids, those kind of things. By taking away this ability for a shop, you're removing that. You're moving that chance for my children to kind of meet other children, for them to go and buy me a paper on a Saturday morning, for example. Very important. Yeah, and it just feels like we're being sort of, cheated really out of that opportunity. The other thing, the shops that are around all would, you pointed out, all would really require a car journey. I mean, I've lived there for 10 years, and they're just not practical to get to because of the kind of road setup around us. It's kind of like the old Spaghetti Junction in Birmingham or something like that around us. So, we need that. What we're trying to do surely is, with the climate emergencies, reduce the amount of short car journeys. Short car journeys are the ones that are the worst ones. If you drive for 5 minutes, your car's warming up, it kind of generates more pollution. It's more pollution coming to the person. And this, by putting a corner shop there, you're alleviating that. People who walk their dogs on the estate can go and pick up, dog food if that light bulb goes off in the head. And, they can also ship in, using a van, they can get the goods from M&S or whatever it is. And then having a corner shop there, you're going to remove the need for a second car. That's the thing. It's going to take that element away from people. It is really a big part of the climate emergency, a big part of sustainability as well. And it's really disappointing for me that the kind of development has won these sustainable awards for converting like the property, from a Grade 2 listed building but not doing anything long term. There's no kind of, they spent ages using this spray along the walls to clean all the bricks. But basically that's going to get sorted up again by the amount of cars that we're putting on the roads. You're not taking that away. You're just leaving that to carry on. Excuse me, I'll look at my other points. And the other thing, apart from the sort of car journeys, is that sense of community. Where that shop would have been was on a corner. It would have been a point where people from the community meet. instead of being on like a Facebook group. And you know, it's really good to have that, you know, to get to meet people face to face across, when you're walking across the state, you kind of get chatting to people, and that's what I've done. And having that shop where, you know, people might be able to work there from the estate, it just feels like a real loss. It just feels like what you're doing is you're isolating this sort of community, and you're not giving it a centre. It just feels like a, you know, it's left like that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's the sort of subtle change in the behaviour that you could influence by having a shop there, by taking the need for people to have a second car. And yeah, that's my key thing. And then you know, that's my point basically. Neil, his point was all
4
about,
minutes, Chair.
Sorry, quickly on Neil's point was basically all about the second, you know, the short car journeys, removing that from the equation.
Thank you, Stephen, for
Okay.
that. Are there any questions to Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the cafe, and I can fully understand why it's great to have a cafe and a focus to an area, but you said it in the past tense. Has the cafe now gone?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a great cafe as well. And I've been on the estate for 11 years now, and unfortunately, it ran out of, well, various things sort of like enforced its closure. I mean, what I was doing when I was working from home, I'd be walking across the estate and get chatting to people and go and buy coffee in the morning. And it's that sense of, you know, you've not got an office space anymore, so that you're kind of desperate for sort of like some sort of people to talk to. And, you know, ironically, I'd be talking to the builders from the mill in the cafe about what was going on.
Can I maybe just add to that?
Yeah. Curious whether the cafe went because it wasn't viable, really.
No, it was no. The cafe got basically diddled by the accountant last year. The cafe was absolutely rammed all the time, and it was a raving business, brilliant. So it had a real, but unfortunately, the accountant disappeared. So.
I would just add to that, one of the other issues for the Park Cafe wasn't just that, it was actually there was such significant parking issues there in terms of the actual development has significantly more people with cars than is actually able to sustain from both estates already. So even with the marginal increase of the number of small parking spaces, we're actually in the middle of putting traffic regulation orders on Goodman Street, and part of that was actually to give them parking bays for the cafe. There is a significant volume of cars on here because there's a significant number of people that effectively need to get off to the estate to any of the other retail options because they're in the middle of an industrial estate with significant roads, and that's part of the problem.
Got a secondary question as well. The officers have been very good at putting where you can go and buy food. How far away do you have to go for things like hairdressers and, you know, other retail outlets?
This is Kim's Cuts, my wife, by the way.
No, I don't get mine cut at all. And just because there is more to retail than just the corner shop, you know, as you said, there's the cafe, there's hairdressers, nails, you know, there's a lot of things at the moment. So is that local already? How far away do you have to go for that sort of thing?
If I can speak, because I think it would just help. So at the Hunslet Centre, there are hairdressers, etc., and all that. They are where they are. I think the main objection in terms of the retail is actually for, if you will, the quick shop. You have to go over a number of substantial major roads, and I don't think the officers have actually paid real kind of detail. National Road is an industrial road. It has significant heavy industrial traffic. I've been spending the last 3 years trying to get a pedestrian crossing across it and only just missing out on the necessary scoring to get a pedestrian crossing across it. And their argument has been is once the other development's being done, we can justify it because we know there'll be enough people there to justify it. There's a major set of school hubs. We've got about 4 primary schools, about 10, 15 minutes walk away. People have to go across substantial major roads to get to these access points. And, you know, I would maybe suggest that members ask officers if they've done an equality impact assessment as required by the Equalities Act to assess whether or not actually the proposal to change this will detrimentally impact people with protected characteristics. Because actually what you're effectively making is almost a car exclusive estate. Because actually, if you do have mobility issues, you're going to have to go across multiple busy roads to get there, etc. So it's not as straightforward as just, yes, there might not be a unit there now, but once that option is gone. It's never coming back.
Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chair. I know the area quite well, Steve. It is Steve, isn't it? Can I ask where you do your shopping at the minute?
Yeah, I'm blessed. I'm blessed with a cargo bike. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I have, yeah.
So no, what I do is I go, I use the towpath and I take my kids down the canal. We go straight into the market and we fill up the cargo bike with food, or we used to use junk food project further down the river, stuff like that. So in terms of, yeah, we've developed a different way of doing things, you know, by using what's, you know, what's around. I take my kids to school in it. So you might have bumped into me on that as well. Well, I've been very fortunate in that one of the neighbours is also going to buy one as well. So it's kind of, it's got getting to that point where it's becoming a tipping point where hopefully more and more people will buy them, and you know, it will kind of. I've lived on that estate for 11 years now. Yeah. So yeah, yeah, we survived the flood in 2015, which was interesting when it became an island briefly. And
I think the point I'm trying to make is that for 10 years,
yeah,
it's not been, you've not starved to death. You've not
no,
been run over.
No, but what
You've managed to get to shop.
I have, yeah, because I've got a bike. But I think what I'm suggesting is that basically that other people have not got the same. I think more people are perhaps lazier, and with the need that sort of ability to have that shop. I mean, you know, why was a shop suggested on the original estate to do that? You know, if I'm the only person on that estate with a cargo bike. Do you know what I mean? That does that. Everybody else has got a car or two cars. If you ride around the estate in the morning, you think, oh, well, pre-COVID, you think everybody was still at home, you know, because but basically there's so many cars on that estate. And what we're trying to do is remove that second car. So you don't need a second car. You know, we want to make it more environmentally friendly.
Yeah, Councillor Jenkins.
Yeah, just two quick things. It says that you have the parking spaces you have to pay for. Is that correct?
So Victoria.
He needs to turn his mic off.
Sorry.
Victoria Riverside, that particular development, yes, you do have to pay for your parking spaces, and the cost is actually rather significant. So it's putting significant pressure on the local road network at the moment, hence why we're having to put traffic regulation orders in.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Am I right in, did I hear you say that Miller Homes were going to put a shop on your development and they failed to do that? And this is kind of your last hope now of getting a shop in that area?
Well, yeah, because, you know, what we hoped was when, you know, when the big mill development opened, and I think is there about capacity for about 600 people. So we naturally assumed that was going to be an obvious win for the developer to put a shop in there. I mean, it seemed like, you know, not only from my environmental perspective, but from, you know, it'd be such an easy sell. That's what we thought. So
if I can just add as well, developers don't offer something if they don't think it's necessary to get planning permission. As we all know, they're not going to offer a retail unit if they don't think it's needed to get past the door on planning permission. So they've offered a retail unit because they thought that was the only way to get their planning permission on site. And this developer is now deciding, because it doesn't feel it can get a tenant at the market rate it wants, that actually it will sacrifice it for a quicker return profit on flats. But let's remember, developers do not offer things if they do not feel they need it to satisfy planning conditions.
Okay, any other question? No? So, Okay, no, Councillor Jenkins first.
So was it a condition of the original proposal that there should be a retail unit?
No, they offered it themselves to try and make sure they could get planning permission. And I think, as we all know, developers will sometimes offer things in advance so that it doesn't have to become conditioned to get it past the door. So no, it wasn't conditioned, but it was offered to make it palatable to the planning committee at the time to pass the application.
So just to add, so it's not enforceable?
Sorry, Councillor Burke.
Can I just raise something else? When it was before this discussion took place, the actual developers stuck posters outside where the flats were going to be, cynically sort of promoting additional flats were going to be on there, and then they had to take them down again. So they kind of like, without kind of like any, consultation really, they just basically decided that we're going to turn this, into flats instead.
Steve, the apartments, you bought it with the intention of a shop below, but they have been occupied over 2-3 years now. Am I right in thinking that?
Well, what's happening is it's been a 3-phase development. So they started off with like about 100 flats in one phase, and then it's the second phase, which is now being populated, and now there's a final phase. So there isn't the kind of like population within there at the minute. It's still ongoing.
Right. So you feel that you have been let down. You bought the flats are rented under false pretense that you was going to have shops close by.
Can I just say, because I don't think Stephen is part of the Victoria Riverside Facebook group, which I am, I can safely say they are up in arms, because a lot of them are actually have now asked me as a councillor for advice on whether or not they can actually take mis-selling claims against this estate agents and the developer, because they were actually advised on the basis that there would be a retail unit on site.
Chair. I don't want to interrupt at this point, but I think David, the case officer, can clarify when it's his opportunity to answer questions about the connection or lack of connection between the two developments and the shop. So David will, when it's appropriate, discuss that.
Councillor Collins.
My apologies. I don't know the area well at all, although I do go to Costco quite regularly. I'm just looking at Google.
It's not. It's before they built it. Shot on Google Earth. It's before they built the unit we're talking about.
All right. So I was going to ask, on the moment in Google Earth and on here, there's a really rough area. Is that developed now, or is that going to be more housing?
It's being developed.
Which area are you referring to, sorry, councillor?
Let's have a look. It looks like it's as you come off the roundabout, the Goodman Street roundabout, and go towards the river. It's on the left-hand side.
Could we put it back up, Councillor Collins?
Yeah, Toby's.
Put it on the screen for you.
Right. So if you go from the red dot over to the left, cross that big road, there's like a grey, a browny grey patchy area. To the left, to the left, to the left, to the left, to the left there.
That is situ. That is a massive development which is about to have a school, and a retirement home, significant number of homes, and actually retail and office space.
Right. So you could argue then that there are more homes to come, and a retail unit would be viable if there's even more people living in that area.
I would argue, councillor, that actually it's viable now, bearing in mind it's in the centre of a not so unsubstantial industrial estate. There's 270 homes to one side. There's going to be, I think, just short of 400 flats to one side. There's the situ development. It has one of the busiest towpaths, which is an east-west connection in the city in terms of cycling and walking. And if you look at the actual applicant's marketing material, it mentions none of that. And I would also suggest that the applicant has shown no intent to actually market the unit, because There's been no attempt to market that unit from I can see in the last 2 years since the pandemic. They've clearly had an objection, and Stephen referenced it. The reason why they had to take adverts down is because they put in their application to turn this to 7 flats. I found out about it. They put the signs up straight away thinking it was going to be a walk in the park. And I had to get planning enforcement to take them down because they hadn't had planning application permission yet.
And could you actually get from that Clarence Road, is it, development to the retail section? Or is that, can you go under that road? Is that the flyover bit?
There's 2 access points. There's the towpath itself, which is already heavily congested with bikes and pedestrian.
Yeah.
There is also a walk across the underpass. It has what I would deem to be subpar crossing requirements for the moment for the number of people that are going to be living and working in that area. And as I said, I've been trying for the last 3 years to get a pedestrian crossing across Navigation Road, which is a high volume industrial road where we've had quite a lot of near issues in terms of accidents. And I've literally been told repeatedly by highways, it will qualify for a crossing once the other developments come online because of the sheer volume of people that will live there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Just for Councillor Collins, it does actually have a signalised crossing underneath the underpass at that point.
There is a signalised crossing on the Goodman Street side. There's on the Navigation Road side. There's one on the other side, but there's not actually one to get across the traffic island in the middle.
Okay, Councillor Burke.
I suppose it's more of a comment, really, and I just think
that comment, yeah.
Well, it's kind of a question.
Okay.
I appreciate that we're kind of making assertions about somebody's intention, but of course we don't really know what somebody intended to do without hard evidence. It's for Steve, really. So I'm sure you believe that the people have hoodwinked you. That's the nicest way I can put that. But I was told today by a very knowledgeable colleague the numbers of people that needed to make a shop viable and the numbers of flats and potential residents. And I know it's opposite the bus garage, but drivers already use the shops on front, don't they? Don't meet those numbers that I was told. So perhaps a retail shop just is not viable in terms of making enough money to make it sustainable. With shops like that, you tend to pick up bits, don't you, rather than your big shop, because they tend to be more expensive anyway, don't they? So you go for some bread or milk or an essential.
I mean, there's the Tesco at the Clarence Dock, which, you know, supports like a large number of flats, similar number of flats. But basically, if you're saying we should use that, that would invoke a car journey, because not just because of the distance, but because of the fact that there's major roads to get down. It's not particularly safe to get to. I'm confident doing it on my bike, but I don't think other people are. And so I think there is that, you know, there is that. And I don't, basically it's not that question, is it? The question is whether the developers have actually kind of, you know, pitch the shop at a market rate, or whether they've actually clocked in their heads, oh, we can make more money from selling 7 flats, 5 flats. I mean, they have put in different developments. They have put in Bradford, they put in a coffee shop in a smaller development. So they have done similar things like this before. But whether they kind of like, you know, had less stringent or more stringent, you know, laws in Bradford to enforce that, I don't know. It's
And I would just up at Councillor Burke. It's not just about the residents, it's about the significant footfall on that incredibly busy east-west towpath, which is used for recreation. It's about the substantial industrial estate that's around it. It's about the developments that are going around it. And just from an accessibility point of view, what we're basically saying is either you have to be relatively able fit to get to Tesco, which is a 10-minute to 15-minute walk, even for someone of reasonable ability, or you have to cross several major roads to get to a reasonable shop, or you have to order in food. And what I would maybe suggest is, bearing in mind not too recently, this was lauded as a great 15-minute neighbourhood by the council in terms of its planning regime and things like that. It would probably suggest that the council thought it was a good one because there was the ambition or understanding that a retail shop was going to go in to make it a sustainable neighbourhood. I would argue that actually in the current state it is not a sustainable neighbourhood, maybe financially, but not in terms of actually the council's ambitions for the city.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions No? We have no one who's speaking in favor of the application, so I'll now move on to members to ask the officer any question. Are there any questions to the officer? Councillor Campbell.
Can I just ask, I suppose, a technical question and a general one? I'll start with a general one. The comment that's come from the residents is basically that their view is that the company who owns the site are not making a serious attempt to market this as a commercial, for a commercial use. Have we seen any evidence of what they've done to substantiate either one way or the other that comment?
The issue of marketing and what's taken place has been taken up with the applicant. I've highlighted it in the report, but essentially they do at face value from what's been submitted appear to have employed the services of an estate agent. There's documentation relating to a marketing leaflet. That's the sort of thing that would go on website. And then there's a covering letter from the estate agent essentially concluding that over a 2-year period, so they say that they've been working on it since March 2018, and then it looks like they've probably done it for just over 2 years, because they've suggested then in May 2020 that after that period of marketing that they've come to the conclusion that there's no real appetite for a commercial use and should explore alternatives.
Can I just ask a technical question in relation to the plans? So that's page 32 and page 33. If you look at page 32, where the Goodman Street entrance to the flat is, on 32, which I assume is the original, there's an entrance, some steps, a tank room, and what looks like a bin store, which I suppose I'm asking where that's gone on the new drawing, which is page 33. And also it appears that at the back of this block, where we've got the lift and various other buildings, which are not shown, the lift is shown, but the other buildings are not shown on the 33 drawing. It also shows on the 33 drawing the new store for the new bike store, which seems to occupy an area of or seems to occupy an area of steps, etc., within the old drawing. So I suppose the question really is, the elements that were in the original drawing presumably have to be re-provided somewhere else. And where else are they? I have to say, I'm assuming the Goodman Street is a bin storage, but the print's so small I can't actually read it. So.
Sorry, just to clarify, so is the query about, so this was the bin store originally proposed for the retail that goes completely under the new proposal, because there's essentially a bin store here serving the flats, I guess, above and also to the side in the converted listed building. So the question's been asked about, obviously for the additional flats, there's a requirement for the cycles parking. We've said to them, it looks like it's quite limited, the cycle provision already. So that's why here it's identified as an internal cycle store for the new flats. In terms of bins, they're not proposing additional bin storage. The assumption, and there's a condition to ensure this actually takes place, is that essentially if the existing provision isn't deemed to be adequate and there's overflowing issues, for example, from the bin stores that are already there, then there'd be an expectation that deliveries are collections are increased to pick up that requirement. So rather than provide another bin store, they would just have access to what's already there, if that helps.
So in fact, what you're saying to is bin collection will be with a private company, not that the council will not be collecting the bins. Or will the council be collecting the bins commercially? And
I'm not entirely sure who does the collecting, because that must take place at the moment. There's obviously facilities available, and the purpose of the condition would be to make sure that ultimately that refuge is only stored in the appropriate areas. So if those appropriate areas are getting filled too much and are overflowing, then they would have to adjust their collections as required.
Councillor Collins.
Sorry, Chair. I was just saying, we don't wait until the bins are overflowing. We need to establish what's happening with the bins now and where that extra capacity is going to be. So I appreciate that you said you don't know, but I think you need to find out. So
just to put it in simple terms, it's not the provision of extra capacity. It's basically what's been suggested is that the capacity that's there now would be adequate, but if it's not adequate, they will empty them more regularly. Yeah.
Yes, but that comes back to Councillor Campbell's question. So therefore, are you saying it's a private contractor that empties them, which they would do if they were commercial bins, but if they're domestic bins, it'll be down to us. So we couldn't increase the number of times we emptied the bins. It would still be once a fortnight.
On that basis, it's likely to be a commercial operator.
But could we find out, please?
The condition would secure the appropriate details to ensure that provisions are in place. So if the answer is that comes back is we're looking to the developers only intending the council to undertake collections, then we'll obviously flag that as an issue and that they need to have additional provision in place.
Is it the council? So that needs to be looked into, because we know that the council won't repeat twice. So that's something we need to look into.
Thank you. I think Councillor Ray just confirmed it's the council. We do have, as part of our highways, we do have a condition, details of waste collection provision. And if there is an issue that bins are not enough, then new bins can be ordered. And there's a bin deliveries team, and we can secure an additional informative within the decision notice that the applicant needs to agree the number of bins and the requirement with the with our bin deliveries team.
But at the moment, for instance, they might have 2 bins. They are going to have another added 7 apartments. So the bin need 5. Whatever it is, we need more bins at the moment to add into it.
Just going back to the bins then. So at the moment, I can't see where they're going. So how many flats have we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, was it? 7. 5. So we need 10 bins. Where are they going to put those 10 bins? On the original application, it showed them where the commercial bins were going to go, but that commercial bin space now has been used with part of the flat. So the 10 bins for these new 5 flats are not going there. So the question is, where are they going? So whether, well, it doesn't really matter as long as we know where they're going to go. They're not telling us where those 10 bins are going to go. So that's my supplementary question. My key question was, where do we actually stand with permitted development? Because if these actually are turned into retail units, 6 months down the line, if they're not occupied, would they automatically be able to develop them into flats? Which way round is it with permitted development, please?
Permitted development rights would apply if the use is up and running. So yeah, there would be the option potentially to convert them at a later date.
So our discussions today might be relevant, because even if we declined, they might say, well, they're retail units, but we're not doing very well with them. We'll just turn them into flats under permitted development. Is that correct?
Yes.
Any more questions?
Can I just add something on the bin?
You want to add something?
Can I add something on the bin thing? The purpose of the condition is to ensure that if the frequency of bin collection to avoid overflowing happening, is to make sure that that frequency is increased. Whether it's a council operator who sometimes do have commercial contracts to actually do this, because as Councillor Ray's just pointed out, they're obviously operating down there at the moment, or whether it's actually a commercial, a private company doing it. The point is, whoever's doing it, the condition is actually on the owners stroke operators of the property to make sure the correct frequency is secured. So I think whether it's commercial or the council is a little bit academic, because the thing runs with the owner of the building to effectively do the correct frequency to avoid that situation happening, Councillor Collins.
Okay, so any more questions? So could we move on to comments? Are there any comments? Councillor Amin.
Right, so what I gathered from this application is that the unit was for shops. However, they're unable to get anyone to take up the provision for a convenience shop. So therefore, they're asking to turn the unit into 5 flats. Right, when the application, if I'm going back, if I can remember, came first of all for flats, that wasn't a condition that they have to have a shop. They suggested that they would try and get someone to take a shop unit on there. So that hasn't happened in 2 years. So we can't really say, give them another 2 years to try and get someone. The application before us is to say yay or nay. Thank you.
Councillor Collins.
I'm sorry I didn't visit the site. I think it would have been a lot easier if I'd had the time this morning to do that. But I think the applicant is actually probably being a bit premature in turning these potential retail units into flats, especially if there is further development just around the corner that would certainly benefit from retail units. I think they're also being a bit selfish, maybe, that they want to convert all of them into flats. We've got a development in Horsforth that's about 400 homes, and we've got 2 shops. One of them is a little convenience store where you can get your beer from as well, and the other one is a baker's, and the baker's also does a coffee, and they both do really well. So sometimes it is finding the right people to run these shops, but they can actually work. So so I don't think I'll be supporting what are we actually, is it actually voting for or against this? I can't remember now. This change of use today, but I would just like to warn the residents in the area, through permitted development, it may be that we lose this and they can do whatever they want. But I think we've got to push them to at least try the retail aspect if we can.
Councillor Hamilton, I've just stated the comment that and the officers, I think he's got proof that they have tried over 2 years. And Councillor Hamilton says the difference is we cannot give another 2 years or maybe a year for them to try. It's no guarantee that they will. And as long as I'm quite broad-minded, because it's proof that they have tried and they haven't succeeded. So obviously, instead of having an empty building put there, is utilizing it the way he feels or she feels best. Yeah, Councillor Campbell.
I think we're in between a rock and a hard place, aren't we? Because we'd like there to be some sort of small scale retail development or cafe or a bakery down there. And we might actually say, no, we won't agree to this. And, we think you ought to try again. But the bottom line is, if they then say, well, in that case, we'll appeal, have we got effectively a leg to stand on? And it looks to me very difficult to argue that we're being reasonable in saying to the developer, you can't do that. If they can provide evidence, which apparently they can, because officers have seen it, that they've made every effort to market these and it's not possible, then it would seem to me we cannot, whatever we might want, we can't say no because they get it on an appeal and it just. So from my point of view, I appreciate that, because I think a lot of these quite large developments we've seen across the city centre, there's a big shortage of what I suppose you describe as facilities. And I think we always say whenever an application comes in, it will be nice if, but it's really difficult because we don't have a policy, for example. If we did, that would be different. But we don't have a policy. We can hang on this on. Now, there's a case, I think, for council developing a policy, but at the moment that's not happening. So I appreciate what the residents are saying, but I'm not sure what we can do.
Just going to say, Councillor Campbell summed it up quite eloquently. I did allude to David Atkinson a question about the connection between the provision of a shop and the original permissions and the other permission, and actually there isn't one. So the approval of this wasn't conditional on the provision of a retail unit. So that's your starting point. Then, so the council, or we collectively, accepted it, I suppose, almost as a gift from the applicant to try and bring forward if it could be, but ultimately they've come back and said it's not viable. But that then leaves us in the situation which David did mention, which is the policy situation in terms of it actually being washed over effectively for residential. So as Councillor Campbell says, rock and a hard place, lots of sympathy. But at the end of the day, if we were to try and refuse this application, actually we went to appeal, we haven't got a sustainable reason to refuse it, in our opinion.
Councillor Collins.
But we have been talking for a while now about 20-minute neighbourhoods. And this neighbourhood doesn't seem to have any facilities at all. We're giving developers permission to put more and more houses and homes in here and not holding them to the account with regards to what that sustainable neighbourhood needs. So can we not argue on those grounds then that it is not acceptable for all of these retail units to go to flats?
I think I think you make a really good point, Councillor Collins, but ultimately, if we get to appeal, the examination will take place in relation to the consent, what the key considerations were for the LPA at that time, and why it wasn't conditioned or controlled. And we don't have a policy that protects that aspect of it. Now, totally appreciate the aspect of 20-minute neighbourhoods, but that doesn't form part of our policy basis on which we could have sustainable grounds to refuse this on. And my view is I totally concur with the points that Councillor Campbell has made. It's entirely correct that if we were to try and seek to refuse this on the points that you've raised and sustainability, the chances are, given the evidence that they've got, that the inspector won't accept our position and potentially a cost award be made against us as well for unreasonable behaviour.
I do apologise for talking behind the back of the chair, but I was just confirming with David, because obviously when we looked at the alternative provision as well, we did make an assessment of what we thought was a reasonable walking time to those. I've forgotten just offhand exactly what that, but I think it's based on figures from highways. Is that correct in terms of how far you could walk in a certain period? And I think that the ones that we've identified, maybe Morrison's is a stretch of the 20 minutes, but certainly the other two are within 10 minutes.
Chair, but there's more to a neighbourhood than a small shop. You know, as we said, there's hairdressers, you can go and have your nails, you can socialise, there's cafes, you know, and I think what residents nearby have seen with this development is that there's half a dozen retail units there, and that could become a heart of their community. Yes. And now that it's just being stripped out, and it's all being stripped out, it's not like the developer is coming back and say, well, we only think 3 shops are going to be viable. They want to strip the whole lot out. So I still can't support this, because I don't think I've seen enough evidence from the developer that those retail shops would be unviable.
And this application, Councillor Collins, is not method supported. I do believe in neighbourhood activities, but what officers and planning need to look at in near future is what's going there. But we cannot base it around this application, because this application is already more or less granted and is on the table and it cannot overturn. So we should ask for further to look into what's put in there, because all neighborhoods do need the things that you suggested. We need, you know, active neighborhood. Stephen highlighted children, they need interaction with other local kids. So it's what we put in a neighborhood, and that's what officers planning need to look at for the future. Are you okay with that?
I'm fine with that, Chair. I was actually trying to find what it was that officers were trying to get us to decide on today, so maybe that needs clarifying.
From Councillor Campbell and also the legal, this would be very challenging things for the council. So we just have to, we don't like it, but we have to, afraid, go with it.
Chair, I'm quite happy if you go with it, but I have to reserve my own decision. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? No. So can I now call on Steve to sum up?
Still writing now, sorry. I mean, the substantive motion that's in front of you, because you've got 2 applications here, don't forget, including listed buildings, so you need to vote on both or consider both, is the granting planning permission and listed building consent. So there's 2 applications subject to the following conditions. But there was also an additional thing, wasn't there, that was raised by our highways officer about an informative regarding how they could get additional bins. But also, and Dave, you might have captured this better than I, because I think I slightly missed this, and it was about the regularity of the bin store collection. Was that an additional condition, or was that meant to be included in condition 7 on the report?
That's included in that one.
Right, so that point's covered. So effectively, you've got the application in front of you for the change of use to residential accommodation to 5 flats from what it was previously granted permission for, which was retail, with an additional informative about informing the applicants about how to secure additional bins if required.
Thank you, Steve. So based on Steve's sum up, can I ask for a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Hamilton, anyone to second? Councillor Burke. So can we now go to a vote? All those in favour?
5.
Against? Abstain? Thank you, that has been carried.
Do I need to? I'll do it anyway, but the motion's being carried to approve the application subject to an additional informative about provision of additional bins. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have, if I'll stand up. We are to the end of the meeting and have a safe journey.